Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 228. I'm Steve Crane. We got Nate Hale here. We have a special guest that we're going to bring on just in a moment. We have got some special bottles, which we are very lucky, and it's such a generous thing to send us, and we're happy to have these bottles that we're able to crack. Nate may have pulled the cork a little hard.
No, I didn't.
And therefore, we got it to work. It's a little rough, you know what I mean? He said it's been a little tough of a week, so maybe, he's just kind of hulked that a little bit. But we'll get into that. Do want to thank our sponsors before we get too far into this. So I want to thank, first and foremost, you guys that do the patreon.com/bourbonandbs podcast. You guys are amazing with the monthly contributions. You guys share it all the time, and anyone that wants to do that, that's great. If you want to just buy us a bottle or just contribute to the show one time because you are feeling good that night, Venmo at Bourbon and BS. We appreciate all that stuff. If you want to buy us a specific bottle to review, just let us know in the notes on the Venmo or kick us a message as well on social media or bourbonandbspodcast@gmail.com. Also want to thank Tinderbox at Easton. We're smoking the My Father La Duena. We did this on episode 30-something, so it's about almost 200 episodes ago. Nate was actually a special guest that night with Jake and I. So
all right.
We're going to revisit that. This is the La Duena number 13 size, and we'll go over that. But mostly we're going to focus on the Stellum spirits we have in front of us. So
yes,
we will get to that momentarily. But thank you, Tinderbox at Easton, Columbus, Ohio. If you guys don't have a brick and mortar you want to support or are able to support, check them out. They do ship about once, twice a week. And they do have a lot of My Father products, including the La Duena in a couple sizes. Also, Altadis USA, we got one of our favorites, the Monte Cristo Espada Oscuro, for the second part tonight. And Beyond the BS tonight is going to be about speaking up, which will be interesting. Nate keeps giving me some grins. I think he's going to have something to contribute or just sit there.
I'm getting the feeling that there's a reason you picked that topic.
There's reasons always that I pick topics, but sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, sometimes they are as I'm driving to my house before the podcast.
So
we'll see. And then BS Cigar Company, the gold and silver. The gold is made by Plasencia Tobacco. Medium body. The silver is Espinosa and La Zona. Medium full with more pepper to it. Those are available at Tinderbox at Easton, a couple other shops, but they also can be shipped to you directly. So contact the BS Cigar Company or us at the podcast. We'll point you in the right direction. And we're wearing the official shirts of the podcast tonight. Pour one more, light up another. We'll figure this out together. Comes in multiple colors on buyjack.com/bourbonandbs. And there's also some BS swag on there. Hoodies, not for the summer, really. 3/4 sleeves for those nice summer nights. I don't know. Fall's right around the corner. Bah humbug. Anyways, that's a lot of advertising. She's backstage. This is Stefanie Bair joining us. Stefanie, thank you for joining us from Stellum Spirits.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Sorry for all of the advertisements there.
No, it's fine.
It's necessary.
Got to get your plugs in. I got you.
Got to get the plugs in. So yeah, and also guys, share this as well if you want to join the conversation live, which we do this every Wednesday night. So I also shared it to a couple of Facebook pages and groups and all that stuff. So it's kind of fun to do that and get people involved in the conversation. Stefanie, we had Will on before. Schragus, right?
Yes,
Will Schragus. He's been on before with Stellum, and we did the bourbon and the rye. And then Aaron, who you guys work with from Robro Marketing, he's been fantastic hooking us up with you guys and just Barrell Spirits as well. The different barrel bourbons that we've had on here before, which you guys are related to. We can kind of touch on that a little bit as well. Some review for people. Yeah, oh yeah, I see it all. But yeah, so
we've got my office look like that.
It could. You just keep your bottles at your downstairs or wherever. You just don't have them in your office.
Yes, yeah.
We can put up shelves if you want, man.
I'd rather hide them from my work.
Yeah, Zoom calls for you might be a little different if that's the background there. Where are you?
Keep a bottle on my desk.
Is that a glass open? The Equinox blend number 1, and then what's the other one? I'm gonna ask
Fibonacci.
Is that right?
Fibonacci. Yep, Fibonacci.
You know what a Fibonacci sequence is?
We will find out about that. It's on the back of the bottle. I'm not as smart as some people. So I didn't.
It's a math thing.
Yeah, I was good in math when I was younger.
Okay.
7 something on the SATs in math. I did AP calculus, and then I was a sociology major, and it just went to shit. But I can tip people well, I can do the math on that, 20%, 25%, that kind of thing. We're all good. Anyways, enough about that. We're going to light up. He's lighting up the La Duena for My Father. I'm going to do the same, but we're starting with, Stefanie, the Equinox blend. And this is the bourbon. This is 117.26 proof. Super specific, taken out to the hundredths. See what I did?
Oh, yeah. Listen, when you're a cast strength whiskey company, you've got to go down to the exact decimal. Otherwise, what are you even doing?
Absolutely. So, Stefanie, if you want to, before we even dive into what that is, tell us a little bit about where you fit in with Stellum Spirits.
Certainly, yeah. So I am based in Denver, Colorado. That's where I am right now. I'm in my lovely dining room with my whiskey shelf behind me with all of our releases on there.
Nice.
I am the director of sales for the West region for the country, and I've been with the company for just over 2.5 years. I started, I think, like November 4th, 2019 was my exact first day. They got me right in for the November, December push of the year in 2019. And I had been living in New York City when I was hired. I had been there for about 10 years, working in different spirits roles, bartending roles kind of across the city. And I really wanted to relocate out of New York to the mountains in Denver. And funnily enough, Barrell had been one of my first brand jobs, like years ago, back in like 2016, I think it was. I was bartending in the city, and I was working, as many extra part-time jobs as I could because I lived in New York City and needed money all the time. And Will, who you just mentioned, Will Schragus, my boss, our chief sales officer, he at the time was working for House of Agricole. So if anybody's familiar with Rum Clement or Rum JM, those Agricole rums from Martinique, he was my sales rep at the bar that I worked at, which was called American Whiskey. And Will and I got to be friends, and he offered me, after a few months, he was like, I think you should start doing some like part-time brand work. So he offered me a part-time role with Barrell. I did that for about 9 months and then left to go to some larger companies. And then, I couldn't stay away. I just love this company so much. And so I came back and moved out to Denver and been happy ever since.
It's a really cool story what you guys do with, the Barrell spirits and like the Barrell bourbons, especially. And we've been fortunate enough to try some of the core line, as well as a couple of the New Year's Eve bottles. There was a New Year's bottle, I think it is.
Yeah. Yep. New Year bourbon,
Yeah, the Dovetail. We've had the Seagrass.
I think we've done
a couple of batches. I can't recall which number batches.
Sure.
But what do you guys do with that? If you want, again, just a quick, kind of plug before we get to this. The big thing about the Barrell bourbons are that it's not just necessarily a regular everyday bourbon, which is kind of where Stellum comes in.
Right.
I remember our previous conversation that we had about that. But Barrell, I mean, you guys, it's all small batches.
Yeah. So the whole sort of concept of our company is that we create limited edition blends. So we're based in Louisville, Kentucky. We do have a distiller's license, but we are not actually a distillery. We source everything. So our whole method is that we treat barrels like they're ingredients as opposed to finished products. And we have a sourcing network right now. It's about 75 different producers, both nationally and internationally, for either liquid or finishing barrels, again, depending on what product you're looking at in our portfolio. And then we treat those barrels like they're ingredients. We'll taste through them, and then we'll pair them together and blend them together by flavor profile, just like you would if you were in the kitchen making a meal, or if you were mixing up a cocktail at a bar or at your home bar. That's exactly kind of our approach. And so what that means is that we make some of the most complex and unique and interesting blends that are available kind of in the country right now. I'm not, worried about saying. And I think that's really.
Nor should you be.
No. And I never want to be like too boastful, but like I do really believe in what we make. I think we have a really, really unique business model, and we make some really fantastic whiskeys. And that's really the most prevalent with the batches, which you just mentioned. So at Barrell Bourbon, all of our bourbon batches are unique numbered blends that are single production run, very small production. There's like maybe 4,000 to 5,000 cases. we do 6-packs, so that's roughly 30,000 bottles or so per bourbon batch. And then it's never reproduced or recreated. Once it's gone, it's gone. And then we release the next batch, and it's completely different from all of the batches that came before it. Just looking to use, what kind of barrels do we have available to us? What do we think is interesting, and what will pair well with what we have in our warehouse and our stocks, and what we want to make.
It's so cool too when we were talking about that stuff. Just a side note, it's just being able to, obviously when you're doing the distillery, you get the barrels and you got the mash bill. But this is like when you're talking about like the recipe, like this is beyond just the recipe that goes in the barrel and then, going through the process that everyone knows about typically. But this is actually, you guys are taking, all right, I'm going to do one part this percentage of this barrel, this percentage. And you kind of know once you sample these different barrels, but just that laboratory that you guys, work out of, just be a dream, be an absolute dream. So, all right. So going into this, Stellum was the answer for, based on the last show, is that you wanted to have more of a everyday product. Mm-hmm. And so that was, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So the idea behind Stellum, you're absolutely right. The idea behind Stellum as a brand, because with Barrell, all of our bourbon batches, like I mentioned, are unique, limited edition, single production, small blends. We wanted to create with Stellum a brand that was a bourbon that was a lot more accessible to people, that was something that they could reach for every day, that every time they went to go get it, they would know exactly what it was, and it would kind of be like their favorite go-to daily drink, if you will, for whiskey. So all of our Stellum blending is done to taste. So every release that we do, or we don't even call them releases necessarily when you're talking about the original Stellum bourbon and the original Stellum rye, but every time we bottle it, it's blended to taste. So it's the same every single time. It's meant to be kind of a more elevated version of classic American bourbon and classic American rye. So we take, bourbons from Indiana that kind of fit into a lot of brands that are out there on the market today, that whether people are aware that they're drinking something that's sourced from Indiana or not, they come to associate that flavor profile with what American bourbon and American rye should taste like. And then our goal is to kind of make that more interesting, take it one step further, make it a little more complex, a little bit more unique by layering in older barrels with different flavor profiles from Kentucky and Tennessee on top of those Indiana barrels, and just punch it up one more notch.
So then you took it a step further to what we have in front of us. So you went from the barrel stuff where it was all these limited releases. The answer was, all right, we're going to do Stellum and we're going to have regular releases. And now you have Stellum specialty limited releases.
Yeah.
Did I follow that right?
You absolutely did. Yeah.
I
know it's kind of funny to say we have like an everyday, this is meant to be like an everyday sort of drink, and then to release limited edition releases almost can sometimes seem sort of counterintuitive maybe. But in reality, what this is, first of all, we're really good at limited releases. That's like what we do at the Barrell Craft Spirits side of things. And we've got that honed down to an absolute science at our blending lab. But, on top of that, we have access to some really interesting, unique, older reserve barrels that are in our stocks that, fit into kind of the overall profile of what the Stellum brand is, but wouldn't necessarily work in the original products because we have these more mature or more tropical or more, grass forward sort of flavor profiles. And so figuring out a way to utilize those barrels that we think are so delicious and so unique and so interesting, and figuring out how to do that in a way that kind of keeps these limited editions still tied to the original Stellum bourbon and the original Stellum rye is sort of the mission with Equinox and Fibonacci, which we're tasting tonight.
Okay, so let's start. It's cool. It's almost like, Stellum is a fairly new brand name and it's starting to get recognition, I imagine. And so now all of a sudden you're like, all right, we can build off of that brand. Not everyone knows that it's that sequence of how that came to be. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and when we launched this brand, I think it was probably the end of March of last year that the press release went out. We launched in, I think, 13 or 14 states it was to begin with, and we slowly have been kind of growing over, the past year and 3 months or so to kind of get the brand out there, and it's still not quite a national brand. I think you guys are in Columbus, right?
We're in Columbus, Ohio, it's unfortunate when it comes to releases of new brands into the market.
But we did just get listed there for both Barrell and for Stellum. So
I think I've seen Barrell. I think that's starting to show here. Barrell is. I don't think I've seen Stellum. I was just in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and obviously I saw everything there.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys,
Yeah.
I was at a Binny's in the Chicago area, and I mean, it's all over the place. It was very cool to see not only some of the special ones. I think I even saw, I mean, bad that no one bought it yet, but I mean, it's June, July, but I mean, I saw one of the New Year's bottles, I think, on the shelf at one of the Binny's I was at. So it's cool to see it out in the wild when we're in, again, Ohio, where you're just like, well, we've had it because we have really cool contacts that send us stuff. But you have to go to other states usually. So that's cool. Stellum and Barrell are now available or going to be available in Ohio as well. So do you know off the top of your head, how many states you guys are in out of the 50?
Yeah, so Barrell's available in all 50 states, as well as Canada, the UK, and Australia. And Stellum is available in 40 states, as well as Canada, the UK, and Australia.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's been very cool to see it grow over the last, year and change.
That is cool. I did have a comment here, Jonathan Herring. So he used to live in the Kentucky area. He was a rep for is a rep for one of the companies that we work with. He's been on the show. And he said he's seen it in Houston now. Looking forward to trying it. So that's great. Yeah, Jonathan, definitely check that out. A lot of options as well. So I don't know. We'll find out what the reach is of these particular bottles as we get into this. So we are sipping on the Equinox blend number 1. So this sounds like you guys are setting this up that there will be a number 2 and so on. This is the inaugural release of the Stellum Black Equinox blend. Was created using Stellum bourbon. We slowly layered in rare sets of bourbon barrels step by step until the evening of the vernal equinox. When the blend was completed,
March 20th, 2022.
when the blend was completed in honor of the changing seasons.
Right.
You already have a story. I love it. For those that believe, and I don't know, that's not really astrology, is it?
Astronomy.
I never know the difference. Yeah.
Astrology is horoscopes.
Astronomy is a science. Astrology is horseshit.
Sure.
It's a bold statement.
Spoken like someone with a science degree.
All right. So anyway,
Sounds like you're speaking out.
Yeah, speaking up.
Speaking up.
There it is. All right. So Equinox blend number 1. Again, 117.26 proof is what we're sipping on right now. What's the story beyond what is just on the back label there that I just read?
Yeah. So I would say that the sort of idea for Equinox and for Fibonacci for that matter came about because, like I mentioned earlier, we had this access to these really unique and interesting older bourbon, barrels that we thought were really delicious, and we knew that we wanted to use them in something, but they wouldn't quite fit in the original, the blue label Stellum bourbon. And so, as we were kind of designing the brand a little bit, we had this idea that we were going to have the original Stellum bourbon and the original Stellum rye, which were going to be your go-to every day. And then we had a product that we released around the holidays of last year called Stellum Black, and it was just Stellum Black bourbon.
I have seen that.
Rye.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea with that was it was going to be sort of a continuation of the original. So the same on paper, 4 to 16-year-old bourbons from Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee bottled at cask strength, but with a heavier concentration in the blend of those older and more rare bourbon barrels that have those different, more mature flavor profiles. And our idea was we were going to release that product pretty much every year. We were going to sort of vintage it, if you will, similar to if you guys are familiar on the Barrell Craft Spirits side of things with our gray label or our gold label lines that come out now every year around the holidays.
Yeah.
That was kind of the tack that we were going to take with Stellum. But after a few months and the initial release of both of those items, we kind of realized that releasing an annual vintage of something that is meant to be innovating the way that everyday bourbon is made is not necessarily innovative enough for our money, for what we knew that we were capable of doing. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to kind of create this Equinox blend, for example, because we had these old bourbon barrels. We knew that we wanted to use them to continue the Stellum Black line, but we also knew that we wanted to focus a lot more on the individual characteristics of each of them. And in a blend that's, being released as an annual vintage, there's not quite as much difference, and it's not quite as much of a standalone product. And it's a much larger release, I think, most importantly. And so, I can't remember exactly how many cases of Stellum Black bourbon we made, but it was in the thousands. And so it was a fairly large allocation for all of our states who received it, which was pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
when you're making a blend that size, it's a lot more about the different groups of barrels that you have access to and what those flavor profiles of those groups do to the blend. When you're making a blend the size of Equinox, it's a lot more about each individual barrel or half barrel. And so we had some of these really interesting barrels that we knew we wanted to use, but they wouldn't really stand out the way that we wanted them to in a larger blend. And so we were like, all right, let's look at creating a limited edition concept with these. And furthermore, let's look at just continuing the line, the Stellum Black line, in this way, in these limited edition specialty blends, because they're going to highlight all of our older and rarer barrels a lot better. They're going to be a lot more true to kind of what the brand of Stellum is, which is innovating on an everyday sort of flavor profile. And they're all going to tie into, in some way, the original bourbon or the original rye, because the whole sort of goal of Stellum is accessing, again, that classic Indiana flavor profile that people are familiar with. And so we're really excited about it.
It's cool to see. It's funny that you say, especially where we see the bourbon and the whiskey world going right now, spirits in general, but the comment that really stood out to me is that it wasn't innovative enough. It's like, now we're going to take this yet another step further. Like, we have a limited bottle that's going to be limited every year, but at a certain time of the year, and it's going to be this. And it's like, oh my gosh, it is cool to see and hear about. This was, you said, what was the date this was made?
March 20th, which, if anybody looks at a calendar, was a Sunday. So our blending team was working over the weekend to finish these specialty blends.
It was bottled on that Sunday? Is that what
that's not the bottling day, but that's the day that the blend was completed. Okay. So the liquid blend was finished that day, and then it was bottled, in the weeks after that.
Got it. I'm just trying to, grasp the innovative side of this, is how far you guys do this. It's really cool. What do you think, Nate?
So I like it. I was looking back and seeing what our reviews were on the regular Stellum, but on this, on the palate, like initially it's got this nice thick honey and then a little bit of mint to it up front. And then after it goes down the hatch, there is this cinnamon that just lingers and lingers and it just sits there for days. Like, my second glass, I know already, right?
We have a second bottle to go over here.
I know.
All right.
Good
thing it's only 117 point something proof.
Yeah, and the other one was 115, so it's less. Yeah, we're good. But no, my second pour, I wanted to have it with a couple drops of water to see how that would change it, and it really didn't do anything to it. Like, it still has that same honey and mint up front, and then that lingering cinnamon spice on the back end. It just continues to sit there on the back. It's really good flavor. But that finish just lasts.
It's a bit spicy finish. Yeah. I get what you're saying with the honey. Also, it doesn't hurt when you talk about the honey, is that the legs on it, the viscosity of it. It's rich.
It's very oily.
Yeah. This is it's a nice surprise. I mean, this is something that's really kind of a cool product. I mean, it is unique. It does have a lingering, I don't want to say lingering, it's got a very long finish on this, which is nice. I haven't been smoking the cigar a whole lot with this right now, but we'll get to that. And I haven't put the water in there at all. But at the 117.26 proof, it doesn't necessarily drink. Some people will look at that, and I mean, Stefanie, I don't know what your view is on this, but especially being in that barrel proof industry, where you guys, your stance is, there's stuff that, and we've talked about on the show before, is that if it's 117, people are like, I need 120 and above, or, or they'll be like, I'm not really into the barrel proof stuff. It's too hot. It's too heavy. This is kind of really nice medium. This isn't something that you're going to be like, holy shit, this is going to really put me on my ass. This is going to really I can't have more than one glass. This is just too much. That's really, really hot. I'm not getting that a lot from this. It's all in that finish. You take a sip of it and you're like, that's really good. And then it kind of it doesn't even do
it's not even
Kentucky
in the chest. It just all stays on the tongue.
It's just really a nice lingering feeling. Now I'm using lingering. It's a nice long finish on your palate.
Cranberries.
I think anytime that you're blending and you're a cast strength company, you of course have to take proof into consideration. I mean, even if you're not a cast, proof is a very important factor in taste, right? But what I hear from a lot of people is that a lot of our whiskeys drink like they're lower proof than they actually are. And I think that really speaks to the talent of our blending team. Our blending team only consists of 3 people in Kentucky, and then Will, who's in New York and does a lot more of the product innovation stuff and goes to Kentucky very frequently, but he doesn't, live there. Yeah. So it's 4 people overall who are really looking at designing each of these blends from the ground up, and their ability to taste barrels and then figure out how to layer them in together, half barrel by full barrel by half barrel by full barrel, until they have just sort of the most perfectly created liquid is really, it's really impressive. I mean, going to our blending lab and just watching them work, or asking, if you ever get the chance to come to Kentucky and sample something with Joe or Trip or Nick, and get them to just tell you what they're picking up on their palate as they're tasting. I mean, they really have a really finely dialed in, nose and palate for these barrels. And I think that shows a lot, particularly in this release. I mean, there's less than 50 barrels total that we used to blend Equinox.
Really?
And so each half barrel or full barrel makes a huge difference on this blend.
Did you have a question? We have a question from our live audience here in the studio/garage. Go ahead.
Hey, Stephanie, I wanted to actually circle back to something you mentioned earlier. After hearing the notes that I just got from Nate, actually, when you said that the thought process when blending the individual bourbons was that not only were they just bourbons to drink, but that they were considered ingredients to other potential things that your consumers would be mixing them with. What I just heard was indicative of something very interesting for mixed drinks, for cocktails. And I'm curious, obviously they're drinking bourbon, but is part of the thought process when doing the blending what your existing customers are looking for, what they look to blend with, what primary cocktails are considered? Because what I just heard sounded like an excellent cocktail mixer, but I'm curious what thought process goes in on the development side.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think, the first answer to that is with Stellum, I think the answer to that is a little different with Stellum than with Barrell. So we're here to talk about Stellum, so I'll talk about that, and we can get into Barrell if we want to. But the idea with Stellum is that we are creating something that people are going to be familiar with already, but unlike they've ever had before. So our goal with any product that we're blending with Stellum, and any barrel that we're picking out to be a part of a Stellum blend, is how does this access the sort of nostalgic sort of trigger in your palate that's going to make you go, I know exactly what this is. I know what I'm drinking. This is a good American bourbon or a good American rye. And then how do we make that better than any of the other brands that are out there, or more interesting at least than any of the other brands that are out there? And the barrels that we hunt down are not particularly specific groups of barrels once we get outside of the Indiana. So with the Indiana bourbons that go into Equinox and Stellum Bourbon Original, we're looking for those classic younger bourbon, notes that everybody kind of knows and loves. So we're deliberately seeking out barrels that are from Indiana and have that like vanilla and butterscotch and caramel and oak and maybe a little bit of black pepper and cream kind of like notes to them. And then we're trying to figure out what groups of barrels then from other states and other producers that are other ages and other mash bills have flavor profiles that will complement that kind of base blend. So, if you have something that's a little bit leaning towards the sweeter side, that's more honey and more caramel, you want some spice to go in there to kind of like punch that up and make it a little bit more interesting and not quite as heavy on your palate, not quite as viscous. You probably want something a little bit citrus forward to brighten it and make it kind of pop a little bit, not just in the center of your tongue, but on the outsides as well. And so we're not necessarily looking for what will this mix well with as a final product, but we're looking more for how can we take this original base and make it different. And so we're hunting down barrels from a flavor standpoint that will match well with that.
I'm actually getting a little bit of apple on this now.
Because of the water, you think?
Possibly.
You just think it's
or it could just be
citrus.
as I'm getting used to it. No, not like an overly sweet or sour type apple.
What kind of apple are we thinking?
Red Delicious.
Delicious, yeah, not the Granny style, right?
I love Granny Smiths.
Yeah, they're pretty good. What other apples do you like? No, I'm just kidding. I just put a few drops in there. We had a question here. I don't know. I don't think you've covered this yet. We do. Let me see. I pull up Jonathan Herring's question about. It was about pricing.
Yeah, right there it is.
There. Yeah. So the black releases are around $100, and the regular bourbon for Stellum is around 50-ish. Is that MSRP? Does that match up?
Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit where you are in the country, but our national MSRP for the regular bourbon is $54.99. I do think you sometimes see it a little bit lower, depending on where you are, or sometimes even a little bit higher, depending on where you are. And then the black releases, our national MSRP on those is $99.99. So yeah, right in that $100 price point.
Pretty good on.
What are these coming in at?
Those are coming in at $99.99.
Okay. So even like this is like, again, that branch off the black. This is now, okay. I'm going to look it up while we're talking here in Ohio, what we're going for here, Stellum.
I think we're at $54.99.
So right now we have Stellum Bourbon and Stellum Rye listed on, we have an Ohio liquor site. It's actually really cool. I know a lot of states don't have it as much, but I mean, this is something that one of the positives in Ohio, that being a state-run liquor agency, is that they've developed finally a nice website called ohlq.com, and you can look up what's available, and you can even, it's usually about a day or so behind, but you can see where they're available at liquor agencies around you.
Yeah.
They list the price. Yeah, $54.99 for the bourbon.
Ohio's really good at pricing things at MSRP. Yeah. Whatever the distillery says MSRP is, Ohio's really good at pricing.
So you can't find a lot of like the hard to find stuff, but they are pretty close to what you guys have as a MSRP. So that'll also kick you where you have some of the, like the more rare bottles, some of your releases, possibly if they do really hit the market hard and say you have a MSRP of $99.99. Well, all of a sudden people are looking for the Equinox #1, and that's $99.99. But in a state that's not regulated, I mean, now all of a sudden it's $150, $200, whatever it might be, because the secondary is driving that part of it, and you don't have that in Ohio. The contrast is that you can't find it in Ohio either, because people are buying it at the MSRP.
Yeah, you get people driving in from all those other states to come in and pick it up and take it out, right?
Now, like at a grocery store, it's
Yeah, I literally saw a guy camp out at 11 o'clock at night for a 9 a.m. release.
It's dedication,
and
there.
It wasn't even anything special. It was just, it was just any of the E.H. Taylor stuff. He was literally camping out for 10 hours for E.H. Taylor.
Yeah.
I'd say you need to get a hobby, but I feel like that is the hobby. I don't know. It's just, it's different.
No, his hobby.
Here in Colorado, everybody does that. They drive up to Wyoming. They'll go right up to Casper or Cheyenne. It's just 2 hours from Denver, not even, and they'll pop in and just buy everything and bring it back.
They'll pop in, or they'll camp out for it.
Well, I'm sure they camp out.
So I put a few drops of water in that. I had a decent amount, probably like
an ounce
and a half.
You saw my post last night,
right? But that did soften up that finish a little bit. I'm getting a lot more that vanilla honey style there with that. So that's just with a few drops of water in there. I mean, it definitely, I don't want to say it opens it up like a lot of people say it opens it up, but I feel like it does take a little bit. And we've had a little bit so far, but I mean, it has opened it up a little bit where it takes away. If you take a sip of this and you are a whiskey drinker, oh, that's really good. Oh man, that's spicy at the end of it. Well, let me put a few drops of water in it. I think you'll get more of a reaction of like, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really pleasant.
Yeah.
I think you get it. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it has kind of softened up a little bit. Like as I've let it air out in the glass a little, it has softened up. Go ahead, Steph.
No, I was just going to say, I think when you add a little bit of water to it, it changes for me anyway, it changes the lighter. It's almost like a clover honey that I get on the palate. But then when you add the water, it takes it to like a deeper, like a sorghum almost, or like a molasses.
Now? Sorghum.
Yeah, like a much richer.
We already reviewed tonight that I'm not all that smart. My vocab is actually worse than some of my math skills, which I'm more of a numbers guy, which we've proven that's not even a strong suit for me.
No, you're a people person.
I think I can be a people person when I feel like it. You said what now?
Sorghum.
So sorghum is a plant.
You say it like I should know it. I've already discovered here that I don't know. Yeah, sorghum. You broke up. You said sorghum.
I'll be honest with you. So it's spelled SORGHUM.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I actually didn't know what it was until I went to like a brand training as a bartender like years ago, and they had like hard little pieces of sorghum candy that they had brought from Kentucky for people to taste like as one of the like food pairings along with their whiskey. And I had never heard of it before. And so I looked it up, and it's a note that I always really like to look for, because I almost tend to go for more like savory flavors. That's just kind of my preference when I'm drinking. And so I tend to lean personally more towards rye than bourbon. But sorghum is a really good sugar note that I like to find, because it's very, very rich and very, very deep. It's not like a light, toasty, like vanilla or like granular sugar. It's like a very rich, viscous. Yeah, it's almost like molasses. Yeah. If you guys ever drive down into like Kentucky or Tennessee, like you'll probably find a lot of like sorghum syrups or honeys or candies kind of in your grocery stores down there.
Yeah, as soon as
such a thing.
As soon as she said sorghum, my wife texted me. She goes, "Sorghum's amazing. It's also a small row crop."
Yeah.
I appreciate you trying to make me feel a little bit better being the guest on the show that you didn't know what it was. I mean, until you took a class or whatever, training on it. I mean,
I'm not a big cook. It's not something that you would find in my pantry that I'd be familiar with.
I didn't know it was something that could be in a pantry. So,
All right.
different there. I don't know. I don't know. I need to try to find that so I know what that note is.
It's not very prevalent in Ohio, so it's not something that a lot of people who live or are from Ohio would be familiar with.
You know what this reminds me of? And Eric's in the garage showing me a picture of the crop. Oh, that's sorghum. Yeah, I've seen that all over the place. That's right fucking across the street. Jesus.
Yeah.
It's in chewing gum.
Yeah.
Remember the candies that we had? Was it Old Forester?
Yeah.
With the
chocolate marshmallow.
And,
yeah.
I don't know if that's what sorghum tastes like, but that's kind of a note that I'm getting here. It's like that. What was that? It was a special thing they had made in.
It was almost like a s'more,
but it wasn't like graham crackery.
No. Yeah,
it's one of the major components of a s'more is graham cracker.
It's all about the.
Was it like a Malomar, like what, marshmallow with the chocolate?
But it had also sugar on it. It had like a sugar on top of it. These were like these little like not soft candies. They're not like that. It's not like. It wasn't gum. Sorghum tastes like Wrigley chewing gum.
Wrigley chewing gum. I can't remember last time I had Wrigley.
That anymore.
Yeah, if you take some of the sugar off of it, he was saying that's what that sorghum is kind of like Wrigley gum without some of the sugar.
No, I have some homework. I got to find out what sorghum tastes like, what it is. I've seen pictures of what the crop looks like. I've learned a little bit about this, that it's not readily available or common in Ohio.
Just go try some brown sugar, my wife says.
I've had brown sugar.
Yeah, okay.
Why don't you say brown sugar then? All right, we're gonna move on. I'm sorry, Stephanie.
No, I was gonna like be picky and be like, what kind of brown sugar? Like turbinado or demerara or.
And this is the reason why my wife needs to be joining in the comment section instead of texting me all of her damn comments.
Ooh, speaking up, that's part 2. All right.
Now I'm gonna get an angry text message.
Well, she can also comment that angry message. All right. This cork came off a little nicer.
Oh, come on. Get off it.
This is the Stellum Rye.
The Fibonacci blend number 1. This is 115.12 proof. And again, Stellum, you guys were... So we've worked with Aaron, again, with Robro Marketing, who you guys work with. And it's funny because like he and other people have sent us, hey, I got bottles coming your way. And we are obviously extremely thankful for people wanting to talk to us. I don't know why. We still are trying to figure that out 200 some episodes in, but also sending us stuff. And it's just like when he's like, yeah, we're going to send you these special black specialty bottles, right? Cool. I'm expecting, you never know what to expect. It's like, a couple of 200 mil, whatever it is. And the package comes and there's 2/5 in there. I'm just like, Jesus. It's super generous. And it's amazing that we're able to do that. And then you hear the price of it.
$99.99, it's like, oh, cool, you just sent us $200 worth of whiskey. So my advice to everyone out there is just start a podcast in your garage, and people send you shit. Sometimes, I don't know.
It's not bad advice. Yeah.
It's not bad advice. How many people listen? Oh, people listen? Oh, shit.
I just went back and updated all the numbers for a spreadsheet.
Good. All right. So
No, it means a lot to us to be able to come on shows like this and talk about these releases with people like you, because, this is a fairly young brand, and it's a fairly different brand, I think, than most other things. And so getting the opportunity to taste along with you guys and get your honest opinions about it, and have, the people who are watching and listening, or who are going to, watch or listen later, hear about it and then go out and look for it, it's a really big deal for us. So,
well, we appreciate it. Yeah, it's a big deal for us. We've been doing this as like a side hobby thing, and it's built a community. And if you're on Facebook, definitely join the Bourbon and BS community page, because it's a lot of fun. It's about cigars, whiskey, and then also there's been some great friendships and community stuff that have kind of come from it. Like I just saw Bobby Hirschman. He's right on here. So here's a quick thing, just a side note for you, which you may or may not really care about, but it's kind of cool. You know how this works, right? Being in the bar industry for a while, now you're in the spirit industry, and how all this works. But so Bobby Hirschman throws out there. So he's in Philadelphia. Can we give a huge shout out to Shannon Chapman for his birthday? Shannon lives here in town in Columbus. They met through the podcast and the community page. Shannon's wife, also named Shannon, is from the Philly area where Bobby Hirschman is. Now they've actually visited both ways. Bobby Hirschman came to a big event that we had here. He's planning a September one. So this is really kind of a cool thing when you're talking about not only, so that's where like Jonathan Herring, he's down in Texas. He's listening live and all that stuff. And so now it's cool. It's not like this is one of those big, YouTube, like we have 100,000 followers, but it's just cool to like see that where the grassroots side of it, people just talk about it. It's more of an extension of just, coming over to someone's place and you're like, what's that one? You're like, oh, this is Stellum.
It's a community, not a city.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways. All right. So you want to read the back of that bottle there, Nate, since it's over on your side?
Sure. This release of Stellum Black Rye celebrates the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers, each the sum of the two previous numbers. 6 separate rye blends were combined in accordance with this sequence. Just like so many other presentations of Fibonacci, the blend that it produced was both balanced and beautiful.
All right.
Yeah.
Still caught up on what the...
Yeah, I'm like trying to get a whiteboard. Can we get a whiteboard out here?
Yeah, we have one right over there. So Fibonacci sequence starts out 1, 1. What's the sum of that? 2. And then what's the sum of the last two numbers? 2 and 1, 3. And then what's 3 and 2?
I know addition. I got that part.
Yeah, 3 and 2 is 5. 5 and 3 is 8. 8 and 5 is 13.
What's the point?
It's a Fibonacci sequence. It's
know the name too. What's the point?
It's something that occurs in nature, and like you'll see how sometimes the leaves or seeds on plants will come up in this spiral, and that's how it's actually drawn out, is a spiral where each ring gets more wide and further out.
No,
I think Eric's going to look up a picture to show you.
It's at the center of a sunflower. If you think about a sunflower and all of the little seeds, I forget what the middle part, but the part where all the little seeds and all the pollen is, all of those seeds are layered together in this sequence, and it's found in like
sunflower.
Oh, we got a spam commenter. Son of a bitch.
Nice. What is it?
Oh, talking about receptions and coin capital. God damn it. It's been a while since we've had one of those.
Let's see what we got going on here.
Seashells. Like a lot of times seashells, the ones that curl, those are Fibonacci sequences.
Nice.
Romesco, pine cones, aardvark scales, octopus tentacles.
These are consistently like there's no like this is a thing.
Yeah. So it's basically, I think in nature, the way to think about it is it's a way to layer armor, kind of, if you will. So like in a pine cone, all of the little like pieces of the pine cone that all center around the seed to protect the center of the plant, or in the sunflower, the same thing. For any animal, it's meant to layer, armor so that its skin's protected from predators. And it's a sequence that is found kind of across both plants and animals alike, kind of all over the world, that nature has created as sort of the perfect way to layer together these different, components of their genetic makeup.
So
I get it.
it's called the golden ratio.
Golden rule.
No,
No,
The
ratio.
Mona
golden
Lisa is a
ratio.
great human example.
But the Fibonacci sequence is important because it speaks to relational growth. It means that you cannot grow or expand without relating to what you came from. So while mathematically, yes, she used the golden ratio to explain where the blend came from. But what it speaks to more metaphorically speaking is that it's maintaining the past while improving with the future without disrespecting where it came from.
Mhm.
I don't look at sunflowers that close.
That's a very poetically succinct way to put it. Whoever just said that.
That was Eric as well. Yeah, Eric.
Well done, Eric.
Okay, so how does that apply to what we are drinking?
Yeah.
Now that we have that
so-
covered.
Yeah.
Good
So
point.
before we get into talking about this, I will mention I majored in journalism and Spanish. So mathematics is also not my strong suit. You mentioned you took AP Calc. I took pre-calc and figured out that if I got a 0 on my final project, I would still pass the class with a C average. And so I didn't do it and took the 0 because I didn't want to get stressed out about it.
Nice. Well, you
So
know
that being
yourself,
said,
which is important.
listen, it wasn't going to be worth it for me. I was going to go be a Spanish-speaking foreign correspondent journalist.
As we see now.
Yeah, totally. It absolutely happened.
Life is part of the plan. It reminds me of a Fibonacci I've heard about, is that, life, as Eric was saying, that the past builds onto the future.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I could. Yeah. And now here I am. And if my pre-calc high school teacher is watching this, I'm sorry. I get it now. It's come full circle.
All right. So
or my engineer dad, who was very, very sad when I went into the liberal arts, but what are you going to do?
Makes sense.
So I wanted to address Ray's comment. Like, he was saying that it sounds like a gimmick, but it actually says on the bottom or on the back of the barrel, like that's how they actually used that sequence to blend it. So they have 6 blends. So so imagine
let her, since we have her on.
Go ahead.
No, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. So we had 6 different groups of barrels that we used. A few of those groups had components of the original Stellum rye blend that you guys tasted before with Will. And so we layered those groups of barrels together in the Fibonacci sequence by volume. And so I don't think we can get too into mathematically exactly how we did that, partially because I know I will more than likely muck it up, but then also partially because I'm sure that the distillery wants to kind of keep that a little bit closer to the belt. But the idea is 6 different groups of barrels, a few of which were components of the original rye blend layered together in this sequence by volume. And the idea that we kind of got from it was we wanted to create a limited edition blend that called back to the original rye in some sense, but then made it a little bit, made it a little bit more evolved, a little bit more interesting, a little different. So how do we take that original product and create something that reminds you of it, that has notes of it, that, kind of exists kind of in that center for you, but then also, tastes completely different, and only doing that with a small, group of 6 different groups of barrels. And I think, looking at that sort of pattern as an approach to whiskey blending, it was only natural that it was something that we were going to try to figure out how to do at some point. If you look at the golden ratio, we talked a lot about how it's found in nature, but it's also been used in human, building and design for years now. Humans noticed this pattern appearing all over the place in plants and animals, and we're like, how can we apply this to structurally sound and beautifully pleasing art and architecture? I had mentioned earlier, the Mona Lisa is probably the most famous example of something that's human created, that's painted in the Fibonacci sequence, in the golden ratio. And so as we're looking at, again, being as innovative as possible with our brand and figuring out how can we continue to innovate on a classic American flavor profile, it was only natural that we would pick up this ratio and then apply that sort of pattern to how we blend whiskeys together.
All right. I'm looking at these comments, and it makes sense. I mean, again, from your guys' side, that makes sense. Now you bring up the Mona Lisa. Now I got Eric here in the audience. He's now showing me the Mona Lisa again with the same
spiral.
Basically, it just looks like a comma, first of all. Second, Am I the only one that I'm not a huge fan of the Mona Lisa? What does that mean? Like I could draw, what is like from her nose? Is that where it starts?
No, it speaks to where the eye is drawn. So the eye goes from the face.
The eye follows that spiral.
To the bottom. It refers to your perception.
I don't think it's as universal as everyone's talking about.
The Mona Lisa is pretty popular.
I know it's popular. I know the Mona Lisa is popular. I'm just saying it's like I don't get it.
So
I've never seen it. I've never seen it in person.
do you?
We don't need to focus on what I get and
Well,
what
no.
I don't get. I'm trying to focus on.
To raise to if I could like break it down for Ray's comment about how's that go into the process
follow up
for the whiskey.
Are they suggesting that it had any influence on the outcome, or simply a way of choosing the blend?
So,
Go ahead, Nick.
well, I was gonna say like
Go ahead.
as an example, this isn't the exact way they probably did it, but imagine you have those 6 groups of barrels. Say they use 100 gallons from this one, 100 gallons from the next one, 200 from the next one, 300 from the next one, 500 from the next one, until they hit the 6 groups. That is what goes into the blend. So they're taking the first 2, adding those together, and then so you got 100 again as an example. Not saying this is the
Simple
actual
math.
measurement. 100, 200, 300,
then 100, then 100.
500, and then 800. So that would be your 6 groups of barrels right there.
You know what's fun about drinking is that you learn things.
And you come up with t-shirt designs.
What do you think of the? What do you think of this?
I love the rye.
You love the science behind this.
No, I literally love the juice. Like
Let's
I went
bring it back for
like-
a second.
like
here.
I went
Who's that?
Sorry, it's my cat is like just really mad that I'm not paying attention to him.
What's your cat's name?
Pump.
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 Nice. Welcome. Not the first time that we had, like, I've had my dog Tony on the podcast before, so it happens. It happens.
It's the world that we
Jonathan
live
Aaron
in
keeps saying
now.
I need to watch the Da Vinci Code, or there's a book too. I heard. Wait, Ray.
There's like
what,
3 books, I think.
Right, there is. Ray, I did put it up. So Ray's asking me to ask you his question. So which question, Ray? If you could type it back in, we'll put it up on the screen as well. I put the one up there about.
Yeah, I thought we already got to
suggesting that it had, and maybe to you. Are you suggesting that it had any influence on the outcome, or simply a way of choosing the blend? I guess what he's asking. Obviously, you wanted this to be good to a point that people are going to enjoy it, but did you do it simply from this theory, right? From this mathematical equation, and then what happened? I mean, obviously, you had to pick certain barrels, right, for this to the 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 1 = 3 type equation. But I mean, did you pick which one was which? Did you say, all right, well, let's do this mathematical equation with this sequence? That sucks. Let's switch the sequence around, because again, you guys being, like you said earlier on, innovative on top of, in a sense, the way I read it, it's like, innovative on top of what's already happening, being, so you're not having fun in a sense that you're reinventing the wheel, but you're taking what you have available to you and you're applying now a principle. And I think that goes back to Ray's first question, was that, is this a gimmick, or is this something that you're like, hey, let's try this because it's worked in so many different ways?
Yeah. That's a completely fair question. I think on first glance, if you were looking at this product, you would be like, okay, that's cute. Like, I get it. Like, cool name. Let's move on. But it actually, it really is an intentional way of approaching the whiskey blending. And so if you think about the different groups of barrels that we have access to, or the rarer stocks that we had in our warehouses, as we were looking at how to use those barrels in a blend, we're going back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the tasting, which is how will these different groups of barrels pair well together? Which will complement which, and in what volume are we going to put them in? And we start with a really, really small blend. I mean, we literally will start to create these by the milliliter as we're making them.
Yeah.
And so
that's the laboratory I was mentioning that I think Will said something about. Yeah.
Yes, our blending lab, which is, there's hundreds and hundreds. Ray, that is a very fair question. I'm glad that you asked that question. There are hundreds and hundreds of, samples that we have in there that we pull from all of our different barrels that we're warehousing. And, we taste through them, we pick the flavor profiles that we think are good, and then we create these blends milliliter by milliliter. And then as we're identifying groups of barrels, the 6 different groups of barrels, it was really about, okay, what is the profile of this group of barrels, and then how much or how little of that do we need to create a unique influence on this second group of barrels, and then how does that kind of work in a chain reaction kind of across all of these. I mean, certainly you want to set out to create a product that is good, right? If this product didn't work, we wouldn't have released it. I think this is one of the better products we've released in quite a while. But, having that kind of idea of, all right, here's this pattern that we see in nature, we see it in building and design. We have an initial concept, which is the original Stellum rye that we want to build a blend around. Let's try it out with these different groups of barrels, and let's see what happens. And we'll build it up slowly, and then we'll scale it up by volume as we go.
Mm-hmm.
It took, I would say we probably worked in this blend for 3 or 4 months or so until we had it finally completed. And so there were a lot of different iterations of it that I'm sure didn't make it into the final bottling, but we did, set forth with that idea in hand as we started the blending project.
So is there ever a time where, I know you guys are the whole Stellum project was to do something where you have more of a regular product where it says Stellum bourbon, this is what you should try to expect. Obviously, there's going to be some slight differences because of the volume you guys do with that, and also the Stellum rye. Now you're doing these limited runs with certain barrels.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any intention to, like with this product that we're sipping on, this rye, to do that sequence with something else to then expand this? I mean, obviously you'll do a number 2, whatever's successful, right? It's also a business. I mean, people tend to forget sometimes when they're passionate about a product that they like, a hobby, a lifestyle, like collecting bottles and stuff like that we have in the bourbon side of this podcast. You don't do a number 2. Well, we didn't do a number 2 because no one, we had bad feedback on this, so we didn't do it again. I mean, that might happen on something that you guys put out, but you guys keep doing certain things. Would you ever consider being able to do this type of a sequence as a regular release, do you think?
I don't know if it would work as a regular release simply because of the intricacy of the blending that's involved in it. It doesn't really lend itself to something that you can keep together as a formula and just kind of produce every week. Again, there's like 50 barrels or less that go into Fibonacci. I think it's right around 50. It might be like 47 or 48, but it's right around 50. And having the blend be so dependent on each individual barrel created in this really intentional, complicated pattern won't really lend itself to being something that we can have it available consistently. But that being said, we did number these intentionally with the idea that the concept of Equinox or the concept of a Fibonacci blend may come back in 6 months, a year, 2 years, like who knows.
You don't really like put a timeline on these things. It's just number 1. So it's not an annual release necessarily.
Exactly. It'll be just more about what barrels do we have access to. First and foremost, are we excited by them? Will they work in this blending pattern? Because again, we're not going to just release something called Fibonacci and have a cool marketing story of how we blended it behind it and not have it actually be the best possible product that we could make. I can tell you very confidently, if we've been making Fibonacci or Equinox for that matter, and we had this idea that we were going to finish the blend on the vernal Equinox and call it Equinox, so we were going to blend it in this Fibonacci pattern and call it Fibonacci, and it didn't work, we would have gone back to the drawing board and scrapped it and figured out a different way to do it. So, it's possible that we'll use, another 6 or 7 or 8, groups of rye barrels to create a Fibonacci blend number 2, but there'll be entirely different barrels with different flavor profiles that go into that blend. It will always have components of the original Stellum rye should we choose to do it again, because that's kind of the point. It's an evolution of the original Stellum rye, but it'll be an entirely different flavor profile and proof than the first release that we're tasting right now. It's also possible that we'll do a different rye blend and we'll call it something entirely different. We'll have a different blending approach that we'll use. We might do a Stellum Rye Solstice blend #1 that we finish on the solstice with different flavors of rye barrels. It's really going to be more about kind of how this, I think, initial bottling is received and how people like it in the market, and how well it does. And then certainly, you know, again, what barrels do we have that we're excited by, and how can we create something unique and interesting out of them?
Who's the math person that was behind this? You know, like I'm thinking of other theories, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back. This is a long time ago, sadly, but the Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah,
theory. Pythagoras. I mean, is there a potential for a math series here? And I'm not making fun of this. I'm just kind of like, obviously, like, this is not the fact that I didn't know
A squared plus B squared.
I'm
equals C
not
squared.
a dumb person, depending on who you ask, but I'm just saying, like, don't.
No, you're not.
I mean,
not at all.
you're on video. You did like a head cock on that right there. I'm just saying, like, it's something that I feel as though like someone was behind this. Is there a mastermind behind that particular project?
You know, I mean, certainly Joe is the mastermind behind everything that we do within the company. Nothing sort of happens without his say so. But I will say, of the people on the blending team, I think it's probably fair to say that Will and Trip are the most mathematically minded.
There you go.
Will is just yeah. Will is just very, very smart and knows math very well, and is very excited by physics and you know, calculus and kind of all of those subjects that I avoided as much as I could. And then Trip has a very complicated chemistry degree.
Yep, we covered that when he was on the podcast.
Yeah.
That was a while back when we had the what was that? That was when we did the dovetail and everything else, right? The seagrass.
Yeah,
the barrel. Yeah, we had Trip on there.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we did that, but it was, yeah, learning his background. It's like, oh, that makes sense why you know how all this works in the distillery side of things.
Well, you know, and Will's also our Chief Product Innovation Officer. So I think a lot of our ideas kind of come from Will to some extent. Certainly, I mean, everybody in the blending team has ideas that are all conceptualized at some point or another. We have dozens of products, as you guys know. But I think Will has a lot to do with a lot of our innovation and kind of figuring out, like, here's this pattern or the sequence or this idea, and how do we then take that to the blending team and say, like, all right, how do we kind of build something around this? Will it work? Will it be good? And then Joe and Trip and Nick figure out how to do that day to day in the blending lab, designing these kind of from the ground up.
It has a lot of parallels to the cigar industry. You know, when the background that you bring towards the table with this, you guys are newer, you're younger to this, but you're taking what I appreciated about, if you guys listen back to those other podcasts and what you were talking about being innovative on top of what's already out there, you guys are taking something with a very, very good respect to what got those barrels to where they were. You aren't recreating the product. You're not doing stuff. And I'm not dogging anyone that does this on the whiskey side of things, but it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we're gonna 53-gallon barrels. No, we're gonna do smaller ones. We're gonna pressurize them. We're gonna do them in different climates. We're gonna do all this stuff, and it's like that's a different product.
Mm-hmm.
You're calling, and I'm of the opinion, you're calling it bourbon, you're calling it whiskey based on the classifications because of what you did with all of this, but you're trying to reinvent the wheel. Like
when we recently had that outlaw bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not calling anyone. Like, I get what you're saying, but yeah, absolutely. So like, you guys are doing this where you're taking the proven history of what you're putting in these bottles, but you're utilizing what you know about it. And then you mentioned Trip, Will, other people in your company. You've been there now for 2 to 3 years. It's like you're utilizing this. It seems from my vantage point is that you guys, the passion and the love that you have for the history, you're taking what you are able to get your hands on and really take it and express it in a not a new way, but almost like a honed in way, and saying we can do so many new things with this history, as opposed to they've been doing it wrong, we're going to do it a different way, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I think it's about, you know, highlighting your skills, right? So everybody has different skills, and there's a lot of different ways to innovate in any industry. In the whiskey industry in particular, you can influence a product a number of ways. It can be, what's the mash bill? What kind of water did you use to distill it? What proof did you pull it at? What kind of barrel did you put it into? What was the char on the barrel? Did you give it a cask finish? Did you dilute it before you bottled it? There's a lot of different ways to look at that. We don't think about really any of that. We then go, okay, here's what somebody else would consider a finished product. How can we reimagine this finished product to turn it into something totally different? And what are our strengths to figure out how to do that? And our strengths are blending, which has to do with nosing and tasting, and very, very, I think quite a lot of patience. I think it's fair to say that we have a lot of patience at the facility, and a lot of foresight in kind of how we're going to plan out, how we're going to design these and spend months making them.
Well, I think just to highlight this before we have to talk on the cigar a little bit just for a moment, but what really I think from the business side of it is to really, from again our viewpoint, being in Ohio, right, and Stellum is very new on the scene. Barrell Spirits is not really all that old either, and to see all that stuff and to hear. And when I got the email from Aaron, it's like, oh yeah, Will can't be on, but Stefanie's gonna be on. I was like, Jesus, like these guys are just blowing up. Like they've got they got depth now. Like, and it's like, okay, Stellum's got like Barrell's got like a sale. Like, and I get that again from the business side, is that I don't think everyone realizes what your company is doing from the Barrell side to the Stellum side, and what's to come of that is that the fact that you're securing certain barrels. Mm-hmm. You're not just utilizing and again, not talking bad about someone that just, puts their label on a source whiskey, like that. I think that's great. I think that is something that those barrels are out there that like MGP, for example, in Indiana, they're making so much product that people can put their stickers on it. They can put their bottles around it. And that's a great product. You guys are taking it a step further, and you're like, no, we're buying barrels, and then we're doing a lot of things to this. Mm-hmm. But the amount of capital that is tied into all of these barrels, and then you're like, yeah, no, we bought these. We think we know what we're going to do with these. And then I can only imagine 6 to 12 months later, you're like, yeah, we were wrong. Now that barrel is in this, and it's phenomenal. I just think that the scope is sometimes overlooked by some, that they just are looking at like, I want this bottle mm-hmm. to taste good and have a good story. Mm-hmm. And now obviously in the bourbon side of things is that they're like, I also want this bottle to be on my bar and no one else can get it, because there's this, I don't want to say an ego thing, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I feel like the appreciation is to what you guys are doing as a business is such a cool, as Jonathan Herring says, cool project. It's just really fun to see that side of it.
Yeah, thank you. I think intention is kind of what it boils down to with our company. It's about, first of all, we're not just buying anything we can get our hands on. We're tasting everything before we buy it. We're only buying things that we're excited by. In some cases, we'll sit on barrels that we bought years ago and just let them continue to age up. In some cases, we'll get access to some really old barrels kind of immediately that we think are fantastic, and we'll just go ahead and purchase them. And sometimes we know immediately what we're going to do with them, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's more just like, this is a really great group of 6, 12, 24 barrels, and I'm sure we'll figure out something to do with them, but I'm not going to let this opportunity go by because I love these and they're going to make a really cool ingredient in something in a year or 2 years.
Can I ask you a question here? Because I know some people that don't grow tobacco, but they also they buy it from great manufacturers and farmers, right? Yeah. I'm going to say this, and I'm wondering if you guys have ever, to your knowledge, this is something maybe for Will or Trip, have you ever gone into Indiana or any of these other sources and say, yeah, we'll sell you that, but you got to buy that? Because this happens a lot in the cigar industry where they're buying tobacco, yes, like wrapper leaf, right? Wrapper leaf. I don't know. You said you don't smoke cigars. The wrapper leaf is typically tougher sometimes to come by what you want. And say someone that is making cigars, but they don't grow the tobacco, they buy tobacco, and they've gotten to the point where they have their own factory. So they're manufacturing cigars, but they are sourcing their tobacco. There is a lot of where it's like, Yeah, no, I'll sell you that wrapper leaf, but you need to take this palette and that palette as well if you want that. And so they then buy, I want this for this project. What triggered this was the fact that you're like, yeah, sometimes we buy barrels that we don't know what we're gonna do with. They're like, yeah, all right, if I need to buy that to get that, all right. Now they have this tobacco sitting there, like, what are we gonna do with that? And they come up with like a bundle line. They come up with like, oh, I'll throw that in like a filler leaf. Like, it's something in the tobacco industry that I wonder if it's something where you guys are at. You're reminding me more and more of, for those that smoke cigars, good friend of ours, Eric Espinosa. He's someone that told me that, you know, specifically is that sometimes when he wants to buy a certain lot of tobacco, they say, well, we'll sell you that, but you have to buy this. And then he has to figure out what to do with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, you know, first of all, we don't buy anything that we don't know for sure we're going to use. And so we're never in a situation where we're like, we don't really like this, but we'll buy it to get access to the thing that we really do want. But that being said, we work with, you know, bourbons and ryes for that matter of all kinds of ages, you know, anywhere from 4 to, I believe it's, you know, 20 years old right now is some of the oldest stuff that we have. And sometimes you can buy barrels that you have a pretty good idea of what you know they're going to turn into when you buy them young. If you're going to let them sit for a couple of years, you know what they'll be eventually. And you can track their progress as they age, of course, like any other distillery would do, and decide when they're ready to pull and use as an ingredient in a blend. That's pretty common. But in other ways, we'll get a call from people that we've been working with for a really long time who know that we are always looking for unique barrels that probably come with like a higher price point that, you know, would be in very high demand. And they're like, hey, you know, these are available. Would you like them? And it's not a question of we're going to buy these whether or not, you know, we've tasted them and figure out what to do with them later. It's like, we've tasted these. We know they're good. We trust the source they came from. We know they're going to turn into something cool. We don't know quite what that is yet, but we are confident that it's going to be something really good. And it might even influence a product that we make in a year or 2 years. It might that particular product might stem from an idea that we got from that group of barrels, or those group of barrels might be used as an ingredient in that product. So I hope I'm not giving off the impression that we are unintentionally buying things that we're not excited by because we want access to other things. Although I am sure that happens in the industry all the time.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
In most industries. We do buy everything with a plan of some sort. And whether that plan could either be, this is really good and we're going to figure out how to use it, or that plan can be, this is going to be the main ingredient in a new product that we're going to release in 2 years and we're going to buy 500 barrels of it right now.
Sorry, we're gonna close the one door of our studio here because there's a rainstorm coming through here. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Just pull it down.
I can't, but
you cannot.
I can't. No.
Oh, perfect. She literally quieted the storm. It's phenomenal. It's
nice job, Eric.
You team of Eric and Stefanie. Let's go back to the Stellum Rye Fibonacci with the rating when we get to the end of it. But we do want to comment here because this is the Bourbon and BS, but we also do typically we have cigar people on as well. But when we have someone like yourself on here, we're very, very gracious, and we want to make sure we highlight, obviously, you guys. And so now that we're at over an hour of talking mostly about you guys, we do want to talk to the cigar smokers out there. I'm sorry I didn't put the right was that the
I forget what that's called.
It's on you. You guys are both Spanish. You speak Spanish fluently. Duena, the little Enya.
Enya. Yeah.
See, in my mind, I was saying Enya, but that's an Irish singer, so no. I was close.
Great stuff, though. I mean, great absolutely. Portfolio. Yeah. The La Duena is from My Father Cigars, and this I can't remember when this came out. It's been out for a while. It's kind of a cool story. You think 03? I don't think it's that long ago, honestly. But La Duena in Spanish. I have two Spanish major on screen, so we'll put it to you first. Do you know what La Duena means?
You mean the owner?
Yes.
The
What do you say?
proprietor?
No, she's so it is. It's an interesting word because when you talk about the story of La Duena, it's the boss, but it's
Boss, yeah.
feminine.
Mhm.
So the owner, the boss, the daughter, it is a feminine. There's also the mistress that's been tied into it, right? So there, I mean, this is what I'm looking up. So what this is that so the Garcia family, My Father Cigars has been around for a while. Don Pepin been around for a long time. His son Jaime has been around for a long time, but they were actually part of this before then. Astonishing, really, in the last 20 years. It's been really cool to watch, but based out of Nicaragua. But Don Pepin was a great roller and blender for other companies, branched off, did his own thing. And then at that point, Jaime, his son, came in. Yanni, who's the daughter, which where this ties in here, she became part of the business. And she was working with, there's a couple of them. Tres Reñas is what it was, I think it was, with the Quesada daughters. There's three of them in the project. And it was Tres Reñas. This was a limited thing. You guys know about limited projects here at Stellum. This is something where they actually really worked on this project where this is still available today. And there's this silhouette. It's red. I wish we could zoom in. I don't have that technology here.
Go in front of the camera.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But it's very classic red and white silhouette. It's a red background, white silhouette, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Very basic boxes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a clasp open box,
mm-hmm.
and on that box, it's again classic, just like the nice natural wood. And then they have basically a amped up sticker across all of it with the same logo on there. This is something that was cool to see. For those that don't know the story, it's blended by Jaime Garcia, Yanni Garcia, and Pete Johnson. So Pete Johnson, I'm going to go off on this a little bit here. Pete Johnson owns Tatuaje Cigars. He was in the industry, he was a musician before. He worked in a cigar shop. He met Don Pepin, and then all of a sudden they started talking about what a classic. Pete was like, I want to start my own company.
Cigar.
And so all of a sudden, Don Pepin's like, oh, I'll blend you cigar. He's like, no, I want like a classic Cuban, but I want to be strong. And that's where the brown label came out,
mm-hmm.
which was a Tatuaje. Let's fast forward here a little bit. Now, Pete Johnson's working, obviously, with the Garcia family. Long story short, this cigar, if I was Pete and Yanni, this is the cigar that I'd have at their wedding. You know what I mean? Like this is... You see this, and they blended this, and they named it the La Duena because of Yanni's role in it.
Yeah.
But she was able to learn and work with Jaime, the son, and Pete, who's now her husband. So he is now married into the family with Yanni.
It's a good way to go.
It's honoring the family. It's honoring Yanni being a woman in a male-dominated industry, and now you have this out there. The blend is really unique in my opinion as well. I love it because I'm a broadleaf fan. So it's got Connecticut broadleaf as a wrapper, binder, and part of the filler.
Yeah,
and Nicaraguan tobacco to kind of supplement that as well. What are your thoughts on this cigar?
Wait, you said Connecticut broadleaf, as in like all of that is grown in Connecticut?
Correct.
Or okay, so you have
because this was before broadleaf was really getting produced, to my knowledge, in Nicaragua.
Yeah, so you have a lot of tobacco in this cigar grown in the U.S. and then some of the other filler is Nicaraguan.
You getting poetic on me?
I'm just
Johnson.
I'm just clarifying.
Who's from the U.S.
Yes, and then Yanni,
Nicaragua.
Yeah.
All right.
Which that's a great way to go. It's like, hey, can you make me a cigar? By the way, I'm going to marry your daughter.
I don't think that's how it went, but this is a product of it.
No, he'd been working with them for a long time before he married her. But yeah, it was kind of funny when we all heard that. No, I do like this cigar. I do like broadleaf. It's one of those cigars where if someone comes into a retail store and they say that they like broadleaf or they're looking for something that's broadleaf, like this is one that stands out the most to me because there's so much broadleaf tobacco in this.
Yeah.
Like if you like broadleaf, here you go. It's not just the broadleaf wrapper or a broadleaf binder. No, there's a ton of broadleaf that goes into this cigar. So if that's the flavor profile you're looking for, this is that cigar.
It's like a rich sweetness, I think.
It's got a nice, like for me, it's a lot of it's a lot of earthiness and nuttiness to it, but not overly sweet. But no, I definitely enjoy this cigar, and one of the things that really surprises me about this cigar being in the My Father portfolio, when you look at a lot of other My Father cigars, this one comes in retail like a couple bucks cheaper than a lot of the other My Father cigars.
I think
like,
they've worked to really keep that price point down.
Yeah, because a lot of the My Father cigars nowadays, you know, for a Robusto or we're smoking basically.
Sorry, we're geeking out about cigars for a moment. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
We're basically smoking like a Toro size, and a lot of the My Father Toros are going to come in around that $12 to $15 price point, and this one's coming in for this size around $10.
Yeah, I mean it's 10 to 12 depending on where we're at, you know, going forward.
Even though it's got so much American grown tobacco in it, still coming in under that price point is impressive. But no, yeah, I've always enjoyed this cigar just because it's a nice, for me, medium body, but a lot of flavor to it. And I think it's something that, like, if someone comes into the store and they're looking for a cigar that's going to pair with whiskey, like, I think this is a cigar that'll pair with a lot of different whiskeys because it's medium body. There's nothing, there's no one flavor note or anything that is super pronounced. It's not extremely bold cigar that's going to, you know, wreck your palate for whatever you're drinking.
Right. Yeah.
But no, it's always been a very enjoyable cigar. And just like a lot of cigars coming out of the My Father factory, great construction, rarely have any issues with any of their cigars, let alone this one specifically. Just, you know, an all around good cigar coming in around that $10 price point for it. And
you bring up a couple.
Go ahead.
Charlie Creekmore, marrying the farmer's daughter. No tale still alive and well in the third world. Yeah, well, combining the third and first world. But I will say, I think that you mentioned this, and Eric, we'll get to you here, but you kind of, I don't want to say you didn't mean to, but you alluded to it's like it's Connecticut broadleaf. I could see this one sneaking by because this is one of their, to my knowledge, a lesser known SKU for My Father.
Well, it doesn't say My Father on it. It doesn't have the very intricate artwork bands.
I think this was a side project that did well. So maybe they might change it to a little bit of Nicaraguan broadleaf because that is developing in the crops, right? I remember a time where there was a La Duena that crops can change. We, you know, again, from this
season
side
to season,
of things,
yeah.
You know, Stellum trying to be a regular released with bourbon and rye. I mean, it would, like, the crop, it'll change. Like, but you want to duplicate the best you can what they expect, flavor, look, the experience. You want it to be that.
You're blending for flavor.
Tweak it a little bit, and you're like, all right, well, if we tweak it this way, I'm not adding artificial stuff, but it's like I'm tweaking it. This isn't the same thing we did 2 years ago, but goddamn, this tastes more like it did 2 years ago. So the consumer's going to like it. I remember looking at a wrapper leaf of La Duena, and I know wrappers on cigars, they color sort it, you know, per box. But I remember I looked at this under light, and the crystals on that broadleaf originally was just fascinating to me. When I say crystals, like, I'm not kidding, Stephanie. You look at this thing, and you would look at it, and you're like, what?
There are times where it's almost like
light's
glitter
hitting it. It's like, yeah, it's like glitter on there. You're like, holy
really?
It's phenomenal. That's when you see broadleaf is one leaf that can do that.
That's the light reflecting off the oil in that tobacco.
What we're smoking tonight, I get it
a little bit.
Yeah, like I just hit it right there. I'm like, oh, it looks like a piece of glitter there.
Ooh, piece of
Twist
glitter.
it.
Ooh, piece of
glitter. There was one that I remember I looked at, and I'm like, this like
a disco ball.
I was gonna say, and I'm embarrassed to say it. I was gonna say it's like Twilight. You know what I mean? When they're in the sun, like Eric's thinking.
That was the first thing I thought, and I didn't want to
That's
say
what she
it.
thought of.
That's what you thought of?
Nice job, Steve.
Jeez. Turn on Eric's mic, and then we're gonna go to the ratings here.
So back when I worked at Tinderbox, I had seen the La Duena on the shelf. For some reason, I had no interest in it. It has no words on it. It had no appeal to just a regular walk-in consumer. It's just a picture, it's just red and white, and it's a portrait. It's not
Classic, though.
It is, but nothing says I should buy this. I recognize this, and to that end, I didn't. I had no interest in trying it. I was checking. So some woman had walked in, was buying, and she had actually made a point to say, on her own volition, she brought down the quality of what she was coming in to buy. It was like really cheap stuff. It was like 4 of something, 10 of something else. And she's like, yeah, I'm just buying this trash for an event or giveaways or whatever. No, she had mentioned that that's what she was buying. And then she said, oh, wait, hang on a second. And then I think it was Todd was working. She asked me to grab something else. And then she comes back out with 3 La Duenas. So having not had them before, I didn't know what was going on. I was new. And I said, so those 2? She goes, oh, no, those aren't for them. That's for me.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. Her phrase was, these are like candy to me.
That's the sweetness.
Yeah, exactly.
It like did she say, before you say the story, a little bit like a chocolate bar?
She gave me no notes.
All right.
She didn't. But I remember that it was a bunch of $2 and $3 and $4 sticks that she was buying. And then she was being protective of these. Like, she was never going to let anybody else touch them. These were hers. She used the word candy. And it was for that reason that I actually chose to pull one off the shelf for my cigar for the day. And then it absolutely blew me away. And it didn't taste like every other My Father either.
Yeah.
And nothing against My Father. I just smoked a Le Bijou and absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I gotta say,
some pepper in the retro.
You're good.
It's smooth. It's really smooth.
When she used the terminology candy, I don't know if it just incepted it into my brain or whatever.
Yeah.
But it popped. That broadleaf, those unique emphatic notes that it has is just such a wide step away from everything else My Father, which is down the middle of the road, solid, reliable. And this is just a whole bunch of unique things that they don't do while still maintaining a boldness, a little bit of sweetness, without trying to go crazy. And again, no crazy price point.
For it
this
doesn't get the crazy high. Like My Father
doesn't have that My Father spice to it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have
a
that
little pepper in the retro.
Little pepper in the retro.
In the
Yes.
retro, sure.
Allegedly.
Nothing on the lips though. It's not aggressive. But I felt like it turned into like a best kept secret almost.
And it's a shame, it honestly is, especially with the fact that broadleaf is tough to come by these days. So it's just, to your point, it doesn't say My Father on it. It's almost like there are other cigars that My Father Cigars makes. So in your old MGP, and hello there, Pop.
Sorry.
You're fine. But MGP, like there was a time where you didn't want to say it was sourced by them.
Yeah.
And now, if you're a new player on the market, you can put it on the back of the bottle, and someone's like, "Oh, MGP, I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a crack." You know what I mean? Wow. Same thing with My Father Cigars. There are cigar companies out there that on the bottom of the box it has the My Father logo on it, but it's nowhere on the band. It's because they're trying to differentiate.
Like that Nestor Moran special selection.
But this is literally by My Father, and on the box and on the band, it doesn't say My Father. Everything else from them either says Don Pepin Garcia or MF, My Father. I mean, they have a whole series on this, and this is sitting next to it. You can put it like literally in between 2 My Father branded cigars, and they're like, "What's that one?" And I'm like, "Do you like broadleaf?" I love broadleaf. Have you ever had that? No, I've never had that. I'm like, so that's where we're at with it. It's a cool story. I mean, again, with the fact that Pete Johnson has been working with the family for a long time. There's a little bit of a love story that developed after the cigar. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah.
At this point, part 1, again, we wanted to focus mostly on the Stellum products, but this is a part of this, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you're not smoking the cigar here, But we do it at the end of part 1. It's a rating. 10 is the best. So typically what we do, if you were in the garage tonight, if you came to Columbus from Denver, you're like, all right, I'm going to light up a cigar with you guys. I don't know if I'm going to finish it, but I'm going to light it up. We would ask you to do a 10 rating on the whiskey, 10 rating being the best on the cigar, and then the pairing, however you want to pair it up. But with you focusing on these different whiskeys here, we'll do the out of 10 for both bottles for you.
Oh man. Okay.
I know put it on the spot because you know this is your job, this is your livelihood.
Yeah.
But again, we've had all different responses. I mean, we're talking to people in your position. We're talking to people that are like the master distillers. We're talking to people that they're behind the whole thing. And
yeah. No, totally. I think for me, I mentioned earlier in the chat that I am definitely more of a rye drinker than a bourbon drinker. That's just kind of always been my palate. And that I like savory as opposed to sweet. So those two things kind of going in, like if I'm looking at a dessert menu, I am never interested in the chocolate cake. I couldn't care less about it. I don't want it. Chocolate mousse, chocolate cake, not interested. But if there's like a key lime pie or like I don't even know. I'm trying to think of like a savory dessert, like a pastry, like forward something or other. Maybe this is better for like breakfast. If you're doing like an almond croissant, or you could have like a ham and cheese croissant. I want the ham and cheese croissant. I'm not really as interested in sugar. And so when I'm rating a bottle of bourbon or a bottle of rye, the first thing I think about is how complex is this? Is the sugar overwhelming? Are there other notes of it that kind of come in and take away from the overall sweetness of a classic bourbon? And what does that look like? I think our Equinox blend #1 does a really good job of that. But it is still a very, very obviously a bourbon. And so for me, I think I would probably rate for my palate our Stellum Equinox bourbon an 8. I think it's one of the better bourbons that I've had. And I think that the tropical notes that you find in it, we'd mentioned kind of earlier when we were tasting like the oils that you get. And again, that sorghum note that I really like because it's not the same type of sugar, make it really interesting and unique for me. So I would give it an 8. For the Fibonacci.
Would you say sorghum?
Sorghum. I like that note. It's one of my favorite notes to find. Because it's not a traditional, again, it's not a traditional sugar note. That's why I like it. So I would give that an 8 because I think it's very interesting. For the rye, I, again, always am going to be partial to ryes, but I really like how, like savory. It's not quite savory, isn't quite the word I would use for this because I don't get a lot of like typical rye savory, like bay leaf like notes in this, but I do get a lot of earth. I get a lot of like deeper like baking spice, like clove and ginger and like tobacco. There's like some tobacco spice, I think, on the finish of it. And so this is, I think, and also knowing that Stellum Rye, the original, is, for my money, even if I didn't work for this company, I would say this, the best American rye I've probably ever had. I'm going to give the Stellum Rye Fibonacci, I'm going to give it a 9.4.
Ooh. All right. All right. All right, Nate. Go ahead.
So so what I typically do is I write my ratings down before anyone else starts. So that way, you know, like no one else's notes or ratings influence mine. On the bourbon, I'm also an 8 on that. Very enjoyable. It kind of surprised me when I added water to it and it didn't change it all that much. Like it softened the spice on the finish just a little bit, added a different note up front. But overall, the profile didn't change as much as I'd expected with some of the other bourbons that we've had where we've added water to them. So 8 on the bourbon. On the rye, just like you, Stephanie, I tend to find myself preferring ryes. I look back at our ratings from when we did the regular Stellums, and I favored the rye more than the bourbon. Steve favored the bourbon more than the rye. So I was an 8 on the bourbon. I'm a 9 on the rye. Really enjoyable, much softer on the finish. Even though we're talking 117.26 on the bourbon and 115.12 on the rye.
They're real close. I mean,
you're talking about 2.14 proof difference between the two. That is not a lot in the whiskey game. Because the rye, completely different profile, nice sweetness, floral notes to it, not as much heat on the back. Very enjoyable. So I'm a 9 on that. The cigar, the La Duena, I'm an 8 on that.
Okay.
I think it's a very solid cigar, great flavor, medium body, as I said earlier, just a well-rounded, flavorful cigar. For the pairings, with the Equinox bourbon, I'm a 7 on the pairing.
Ooh.
Because, like, when I take a drink of the bourbon, like, I got to wait a little bit before I go to the cigar, because the finish, that cinnamon spice finish on the bourbon lasts for so long that if I immediately go to the cigar, it just kind of, there's too much spice going on my palate.
That's where the cinnamon comes in, I think.
Yeah. And it kind of takes away
there. I get it.
Takes away the flavor of the cigar, which I really like. So when you take a sip of the bourbon, you kind of have to just wait a little bit before you go puff on a cigar. So that way you can still enjoy that cigar. With the rye, I give the pairing an 8.5. Because the rye doesn't have that spice on the finish, you can immediately go to the cigar and it's still an enjoyable smoke. You still get the flavor notes of the cigar. And then, going cigar to the bourbon or to the rye, like, it actually made the sweetness, or like the vanilla and honey notes on the rye a little thicker. In terms of viscosity, like the way it hit your palate, going the cigar to that, it kind of enhanced the flavor of the rye just a little bit.
Yeah.
You sold me on it.
Which one?
Sounds good on the rye.
So
the rye pairing. Mm-hmm.
So I put up some of the comments there about the decimals, right? And there's more coming here. Is that the decimals? We have our viewers have created a drinking game, and that's
Jonathan Herring created the drinking game.
Well, yeah, but Sean Anderson in Tennessee is also saying something right now. Is he's like, yeah, I didn't see anyone. I took a drink because they were calling us out. They were not doing it, so I mean, you threw out another decimal. I think you need to take a drink. Sip, not just a sip. No, not both. So Stephanie's like, what did I get into? Yeah. Aaron, never do anything. Don't send him anything. No.
Will did not prepare her for this.
I'm just going for the ride, guys. I'm just drinking my whiskey.
I'm busy. Oh, wait, Bourbon BS podcast. Yeah, no, I'm busy. Get Stephanie out there. The whiskeys, so the Equinox, the bourbon, I really like that on its own. I think that's a really enjoyable bottle. I would give it a just by itself. I think it's unique enough that what we kept talking about, the fact that it's like it has that kind of like that nice subtle sweetness with the honey. You said mint. I think I really liked your review of it by itself. That cinnamon finish, it's enjoyable. This is not necessarily, not just because of the proof, but it drinks a little bit lighter than 117 point whatever
26.
Right. But it drinks a little lighter than that. I think, if you I agree. If you were to give me a blind taste test of this, I'd be like, all right, I don't know, like maybe 110. I think it's got a little bit of heat, but it's not something that I'm like, holy shit. I'd give that a 9. I'm trying to steer clear of decimal points here at this point. But I think I'd give it a 9 just because you guys, I think, accomplished the uniqueness of it. I can safely say I haven't had a bottle that if I was given a blind taste test of the Equinox blend of the bourbon of Stellum, I don't know what that is. If I hadn't had it before, even if I had it before, I'm like, that reminds me of something that's very unique. So I appreciate that point. Coming in at $100, I think it's justified on the project. What's out there, cast strength right now, it might bring it back like a half point just for that like that $100. There's so much out there. And it makes sense that it's limited and all that stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it's not justified for that price point, but coming down to a out of 10 rating, $100, that's a tough one, MSRP.
It's tough for anybody.
But I get it. Going to the rye, I think this is something that's not my favorite rye because, you know, I love the rye's like E.H. Taylor straight rye. I love the Willet 3-year, now 4-year rye. I love that kind of the baking spices, the ginger snap. Like I always, my favorite ryes are something I save for like Christmas morning. You know what I mean? Like some Christmas Eve night for those that don't drink in the morning. I'm just saying, like, it's like that kind of like holiday type of thing. This is not that. This is very enjoyable. I would give this an 8.5.
So it's literally followed this similar pattern to when we did the regular Stellum products. Because like, yeah, I'd look back on those and like on the bourbon, I was an 8.5, and then
rye,
or maybe I was the other way around. I was an 8.5 and then 8. You were a 9, 8.5, but then everyone else was bourbon or rye over the bourbon.
Yeah. I like both. Obviously, those are not bad scores. I think it's great. The cigar itself, I've always loved this cigar. I love the story behind it. I love the uniqueness of the blend. I think that broadleaf can be used poorly on some blends. I do. I think it can.
Yeah.
My Father cigars, whether it be from My Father, Tatuaje, L'Atelier, all of these companies that are really dialed in on that aren't just the branch off, like, you know, La Roma de Cuba, like, you know, Ashton brands and all that stuff. I think that they use this broadleaf really well. And this cigar, I'll give it 9. I've always, and I'd be curious what I said. We didn't do ratings back when we did this 30 some episodes in.
Yeah, we did. Oh, you're talking about the cigar.
Yeah. No, this is before we did the ratings. Give it a 9. I think this cigar, I will agree with Nate that with the bourbon, I'll give the pairing a 7 on the bourbon. With the rye, I'll give it a 9. I think this goes way better with the rye. That cinnamon that you were talking about, I agree with Nate on that. The cinnamon that finish on the bourbon really does. I'm trying to think of a cigar that I would love to smoke with this bourbon.
That's tough because that finish lasts for so long.
It's medium bodied. It has a hint of spice. Not because I'm a homer, but like the BS Gold would be one I could smoke with this because it's not gonna, like, it'll just go. It's a medium bodied cigar that I like smoking. That it's not gonna be overpowered, but they're gonna stand up to each other. This La Duena didn't stand up to the bourbon. It complemented the rye. So he, you know, Eric in the garage says the La Flor Dominicana chapter 1. That's got enough spice that it would hold up to it. I get what you're saying. Like, you'd have to, yeah, it has flavor and spice, but that's where
I think it's interesting. So you and I are kind of flip flopped whether we prefer the rye over the bourbon, but we both agree that the cigar goes better with the rye.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to Sean and Ray, always talking about like the price not affecting the rating, I will say that it does, because the markets on the bourbons, the ryes, the cigars, there's a lot of competition out there. And we just talked about this earlier in this part 1 of the episode, is that Stellum is very new. You know, part of your job, Stefanie, is educating people that are not only putting it in bars, putting it in the liquor stores, but also the consumer side of it. It's like they see this and they're like, oh, here we go, another new one. What the hell is this?
Yeah, I think product fatigue or brand fatigue is definitely, you know, that can really be a real thing when you have
100%.
so many companies making something within the same category. It's hard sometimes to get excited, to continue to get excited about new releases, because you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, that's it. But what I think we do with Stellum really well is we have a consistent one that's available all the time for people who don't want to deal with new releases. And then I agree with you, the $100 price point is a very, very, very competitive price point for bourbon right now. And so it might not be for everybody, and that's okay. But for the people who are interested in this kind of a project and in this kind of like a blending style, that's kind of where it hits for people.
Absolutely. I'm trying to scroll back here. Ray had a question on availability.
It was a question about yeah.
I'm looking back. Ray, what's your question here on availability? So Ray Cheshire actually listens a lot of times. So he's based out of Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
So I would imagine the product availability question might be, you said
UK,
so Stellum
Australia,
is 40 states,
Mm-hmm.
Canada, UK, and Australia.
Yep.
the rye is 40 states. The bourbon is all 50.
No,
Barrel's
50.
Barrel's all
Yeah.
50. Stellum's
Barrel's
40.
all 50, right? Stellum is 40. Yeah.
So that's
So we're not distributed in Vietnam would be my answer to that. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure the legalities of international fulfillment. But Australia would be probably the closest geographically to order from and have it shipped, if that's possible.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see, because I don't know what it is, Ray, out there. Side note there, he's from the UK originally, but I don't know where you would buy it and ship it to Vietnam at that point. And obviously, you guys are growing exponentially.
Oh, yeah.
Math thing.
Hey, there you go. Nice job.
Nice job. My unofficial advice would be, like, if you know somebody, get them to mail you a bottle.
But yeah, hopefully
muscle on the side of your head, I can see it.
But anyways, all right. So Ray, hopefully we'll be able to get you a bottle at some point, whether we ship it or you come back to the States. We really appreciate everyone listening in. We got people from obviously Vietnam, Tennessee, Texas. Charlie, where's Charlie Creekmore?
Well, I think I thought he said earlier he's in Florida right now.
Right now. Tim's local, but he's going down to South Carolina.
Yeah.
Great to have all you guys on and a part of this conversation. We're going to round out part one here. And we appreciate our sponsors, Tinderbox at Easton, Altadis USA, BS Cigar Company, also patreon.com. You guys are amazing. Patreon.com/BourbonBS podcast for the monthly contributions. It keeps us able to do the streaming and all that stuff without really investing into this as much as we were. So we appreciate all that support. If you want to buy us a bottle or do a one-time contribution, Venmo at Bourbon and BS. And if you guys want to buy some swag, buyjack.com/Bourbon and BS for the shirts. We're wearing some of the shirts right now. Pour one more, light up another. We'll figure this out together. That's the podcast shirt. We got some great BS cigar shirts, hoodies, 3/4 sleeves, just a lot of cool stuff on there. And there's some ladies V-necks on there as well, which are really cool. And we'll do some more charity shirts going forward as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, thank you very much. Stefanie, thank you very much for everything that you've done. These bottles are amazing. Cheers. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Stay tuned if you guys are listening to part 2. If you're listening to the audio, make sure you listen to part 2. And we're going to do a quick intermission. And we'll see if Stefanie wants to stay on for part 2. But we're already almost like 2 hours in. So we'll see how it goes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Clear.
Well, now that we're in the intermission, Stefanie raised a specific question. There's a lot of companies that are sourcing barrels. So say from MGP or some of the other Kentucky distilleries. Does that create kind of a bidding war between the companies that are buying sourced whiskey?
I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Does it make it difficult to get barrels from those companies so like MGP is the biggest one in Indiana that is being sourced from. So like, does it make it difficult to get the kind of barrels you want because there's so many people buying from them?
For sure, yes. There is definitely a shortage right now of particular mash bills, particular ages of single barrels, or not of single barrels, but of single barrels of bourbon or groups of barrels of bourbon. It is one of the reasons why we are so carefully approaching the way that we blend Stellum Black. I mean, if you think about the Stellum Black releases that we had that were released in the holidays, that were such big production runs, or big in comparison to the Fibonacci and the Equinox, we weren't ever going to be able to make, for example, the Stellum Black rye ever again in some big, large way, because there's simply not enough old rye available on the market anymore. And it's partially because there are more people buying it, but it's also partially because the interest that we're seeing from people and from consumers in these products mean that rye wasn't laid down in any, or really bourbon in that matter, in the quantities necessary to have it available now in a 10-year or older age statement 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And so there's already a shortage of supply based on demand from the consumer level. And then there's a shortage of supply based on the demand from a sourcing level.
Yeah, because 10 years ago, we were not in the whiskey boom that we are right now.
No, not even close. I mean, it was starting a little bit, like in some areas, but I don't think anybody thought this industry would grow. Maybe Joe and a few other people, but I don't think anybody thought it would grow the way that it did the last 10 years.
Well, I know we've seen, spirit sales, especially in the state of Ohio, increase so dramatically the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure. Last 2.5 years, people were drinking and smoking more. Shocker there.
Weird.
Yeah.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see, what if there are companies that foreshadowed demand appropriately and which ones like overshot.
There's a lot, right? So I think what'll happen. There's a lot of like retail side of things that we see it in the housing market. We see it in the retail side that there's a lot of people rode the waves where they could. Bourbon is much the same. All the expansions you saw from some of the big names, they were putting like millions, billion dollars. I mean, like it was just insane what they're doing with that, riding that boom. Now it's up to the industry to really be able to facilitate the outside factors. We've had that, SWOT analysis right there. Hopefully they've done a lot of that. With you guys in Stellum, I think that you guys are in a nice niche of the market that you can ride that wave where you're not the one investing. You guys invest a lot. Like I was trying to give respect to of like, you are buying a lot of barrels. You're riding that boom to a point where it's like, yeah, but we don't have the property. We don't have the bed and breakfast. We don't have the bar. We're not like up in everything. We can scale back real quickly. And also the people that did that boom, they rode that wave aggressively. We can buy a lot of barrels from them.
Yep.
Next 5 to 10 years. I think that's just basic business, right? Like that's something that all of a sudden it's like, well, we don't know what to do with this. It's like, well, we'll take it off your hands.
Yeah.
And now
that happens a lot.
Yeah.
That is very common. I don't know that it's something I could like talk about to any extent in like a recorded like podcast.
You probably shouldn't.
But we get calls a lot from places where they're like, we don't know what to do with this product. Like we have too much of it. We're not going to be able to use it. We're out a bunch of money. Like, do you guys want it? And Joe will taste it and then he'll be like, yeah, all right. And he'll buy it. And we warehouse in like 14 different locations kind of all over the country. So we're constantly like moving barrels around the US for that reason.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Expensive, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having to keep track of inventory across 14 different locations and barrels from so many different places like that?
I would drink less.
Less?
Yeah, because I have to keep track of that. No, I'd have.
But at the end of the night,
Eric, who's holding a knife, I'd be like, "Hey,
at the end of the night, you end up drinking more."
Create an access program. Is that still a thing? Microsoft Access. So back 20 years ago, access was a thing. Whatever that is today, like create me something that does it automatically, and then I can drink more. All right. Let's go into part 2. Do you want to stay a part of this, or are you going to sign off?
I think I'm going to have to sign off, but if that's okay with you guys.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. But
Love
I appreciate
to have you,
you.
but we understand it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I had a lot of fun, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. We'd love to.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you
guys.
very much, Stefanie. Absolutely. Cheers. Nice meeting you.
Take care. Nice to meet you.
All right. You want to get on this?
What? The podcast?
Part 2. We got.
No, I got a meeting I gotta get to. Yeah, I don't give a shit.
Do you want to have Eric on?
Sure.
Can I have the mic up here so I don't have to?
Yeah, no, we're gonna scoot over here.
Yeah, we're gonna scoot over and put you. We're gonna put you middle chair.
Yeah. All right, everyone, bear with us real quick. Use that mic though, so we don't have to do a new one.
Are you sure? All right.
Unless you want to plug in a new one.
Mic on middle side.
Middle.
Cable going right up the front, do I? Does that matter?
Doesn't matter. Do you want to keep using that mic, or do you want me to plug in the other mic like ours? Okay.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, buddy.
Jonathan wants me to take my shirt off. Yeah. Watch, Ray's going to see that and start bitching about what else I'm wearing. Have any of our listeners that are out there right now ever had Stellum? I know Jonathan said he has seen it down there in Texas. I believe I've seen it here in Columbus. Has anyone else out there actually tried any of the Stellum products? I do think it's interesting. So I think we talked about this when Chip was on, how
I know.
Like how Stellum.
No cigars.
Yeah.
It's the BS Gold right there.
Yeah. I've got some cigars. Like Stellum, they blend Stellum, for taste. They blend Barrell for batch, and then they come out with these two products, which are completely different than any of those.
Mm-hmm.
Like it almost makes it seem like with this product they're crossing into that Barrell mark niche where they're doing it for taste, or not for taste, but just doing it for batch.
Yeah, no, I love what they're doing because it is to a point. Oh, do you have another mic?
I asked him if he wanted to use that mic or have me set up the other one. And
Got the other one, just plug it in. Might as well.
all right.
No, I think that I appreciate you guys bearing with us through the intermission here, and we're going to try to keep part 2 to about an hour. It's a great conversation with her. I mean, it'd be great to have her on. I mean, I told her in the beginning, like, we'll do an hour and an hour, and she was in for about 2 hours. Yeah.
She did her time.
Yeah, she did her time.
Mike's hot.
Test. There we go. All right. For those that are Steve Relight drank, Jonathan is going to get hammered.
Test.
I didn't see it.
Test.
This there. This here.
more testing in a
Yeah.
comfortably seated position.
Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 228, part 2, Beyond the BS. Fantastic to have Stefanie Bair on from Stellum Spirits on part 1. We were fortunate enough that they sent the Equinox. What was it? The Equinox #1 bourbon, and what was it?
Fibonacci
Rye, though.
Yes, the rye is the Fibonacci #1
for the bourbon and the rye, and now they are branching off and doing some special projects from both.
Yeah, but what I like is that they still are different than like what I was talking about in the intermission. The the barrel aspect of the brand.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have seen. Just side note, I mean, they're doing some great things. That the company overall, they don't shy away from the fact that what they're doing, what they're securing as barrels. What's cool is that we all want a cheaper price tag, right? But it seems adequate. It seems appropriate what they're doing. I know there are some Barrell Craft bourbons out there that are $300 to $400.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen
up there. There's special projects.
Yeah.
You're going on like 20 some years age.
Yeah.
I like what they're doing. So we appreciate that. Stefanie Bair, if you happen to be listening to part 2, which I assume you're not, because just the fact that she gave us 2 hours, which a lot of times when we have people from that company, not everyone can devote a Wednesday night, to all this stuff. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much to everyone that's involved in that. Aaron, for hooking us up with that, and also hooking us up with these 2 bottles that we have tonight. Beyond the BS, we're talking about speaking up. Ray Chester says, "Why don't I know Eric?" Yeah, Eric worked in the shop when you weren't in the country. Ray, been a part of the community for a long time. Maybe when you were around these parts, but he's a part of the community. Great guy.
He was at the 10 event. He was hanging out at the Alec Bradley booth for the 10 event.
Yeah. So Eric now lives down in Kentucky. He lived here for a long time, grew up here, and he's traveled around a little bit, moved around a little bit, and he happened to be back in town and asked if he'd come over to the podcast. You know how that works in the garage. So we have him on. He's been on the show before as a guest. We're going way back. So the first time we did this La Duena that I'm still smoking was episode 30 something. That's about the time my old house that Eric was a part of it. You were a part of a show here too, yeah?
Episode 7, I believe. It was the first one, and then
you were here though.
I was here for when we did the Alec Bradley Fine and Rare.
Yes,
when Alan Rubin keyed in.
That was a fun one. That was a fun one. Thank you guys at patreon.com/bourbonbs podcast. All you monthly contribution supporters, we appreciate that. Also Venmo at bourbonbs. Tinderbox at Easton, thank you for supplying the La Duena #13 that we were smoking. We talked about towards the end of part 1, but we would like to focus on who we're talking to, which was Stefanie from Stellum. So we appreciate that. Tinderbox at Easton, if you guys are looking for any of the My Father products, especially the La Duena series, the #13 and #7 are also available at Tinderbox at Easton, Columbus, Ohio. They'll be happy to ship you guys anything you guys need if you don't have a brick and mortar that you can support near you. Altadis USA, I see Nate's lit up the Monte Cristo Espada Oscuro, made by Plasencia. Fantastic cigar. We featured it before. We featured other Espada series on the show with Josh Bentley. Thank you, Altadis USA and Josh, for making this happen. We hope that through the growth that Josh has had, the new reps that we have through Altadis, that we can keep this thing going. The continued support's been amazing. And also BS Cigar Company, the gold's made by Plasencia. That's what Eric just lit up. Hope that smokes really well for you. The silver is made by Espinosa in La Zona in his factory. We appreciate that support as well. And if you guys are looking for some cigar shirts that are a little more subtle, bourbon shirts, pour one more, light up another. We'll figure this out together. That's the actual podcast shirt. There's the 2020 BS shirt that when life hands you some BS, light it up. That's on that website as well, buyjack.com/bourbonandbs. And there's a lot of other shirts on there, including some ladies' tees, V-neck tees, 3/4 sleeves, and also some unisex tees as well. All right. We're talking tonight, part 2, speak up. What do you guys think about this? I mean, I did allude to what I was saying before the podcast, talking to Stefanie. Nate's side-eyeing me right now. You're looking at me.
Right
We're
at
sitting
you.
next to each other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do you want me to face you?
Rather not.
Well, you're getting side eye. I think that it's hard not to talk about speaking up from the political point of view.
Right.
And I know that it's incredibly challenging to enter a conversation without bringing up politics, but I also think that it's important to focus on the concept of speaking up without having to talk about the subjective nature of individual politics, because I think that what you alluded to was far more important.
Yeah.
Which is the emphasis of the self and what is important to you, because I don't think that signing on to somebody else's theories is how we grow. I don't think that that's how we evolve as a community.
But I think that what I put in the description here tonight was, in Beyond the BS this week, we were talking about saying something when you feel like you have something to say. Speaking up isn't just about running your mouth with your opinions or complaining. Rather, it is something that takes tact and sometimes some planning. This is something that I feel as though sitting on your feelings, sitting on your let's take this on a positive note. When someone does something really nice, or someone around you hits a goal, you see them hitting a benchmark in their life. On the positive side, do you reach out? Someone you haven't talked to in 3 months. Not even talking about like someone Facebook friend that you went to high school with. I'm saying like someone that you weren't invited to their wedding. They had a cookout, whatever, but you see it now. This is reality. This is our reality, is that you hear about it. You see that they had a great accomplishment. Do you like the post? Do you send them a message?
No.
Do you do anything, or you just let it ride and realize that my role in this person's life is not that? Or do you take the driver's seat and realize that they've had this big thing, and it's not about your personal gain or your ego, that you just you reach out and you're like, dude, we haven't talked in a while. I'm just super happy for you. It's so good. You so deserve that. Do you put it out there? Do you do that? Do you say something? Let's start this on a positive note. And I don't want. It's so easy. Like I get what you're saying, Eric. Yeah. Like, because that is real easy. It's these days. Is like, do you say something when someone upsets you? Yes or no? But when someone does something really positive that may even inspire you, do you let them know? Do you say something? You're like, congratulations. Do you do that? What effort do you put in?
All right, I got this.
I know you
do. All right,
do.
Listen, if you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram and you want to like something that I posted, how many seconds does it take you to do that? Roughly.
A lot of comments.
1, 2,
about 0.1,
yeah,
0.2.
maybe, and you could be a fast scroller, whatever. Now, let's say you really liked something, or you had a response to something I posted. How many seconds would it take for you to write a comment, roughly, with your normal Facebook interactions?
You're talking seconds, obviously.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
because most people aren't going to spend several minutes researching something. You'd probably talk 3, 5, most of like 10, 15 seconds, right?
Sure.
So you've just volunteered your time alive on this earth in seconds.
So why wouldn't you do that?
No, hang on. Now, when I see those pretty on the face reminders that my friend had a birthday, or my friend got married, or my friend moved out of state, I don't like that post. I don't comment on that post. I ask myself if that friend matters to me, and you know what I do? I take time when I know that I can actually give them my time, and I find the right time to call them, and I talk to them about it.
You're a unique person. I second guess me having you on the spot.
Because I think that the most valuable thing that I can give someone is my time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be money spent. It doesn't have to be what the subjective words or comments are. I'm choosing to give you one-on-one energy and time out of my life to talk to you about something about yours, something that you've just accomplished, your new relationship, your new wife, your new house, your new job. If you matter to me, I'm going to call you and I'm going to ask you about how are other things, what's going on. And it doesn't have to be to a specific end. I don't want to have an opinion. I want you to know that what's going on in your world impacted me so positively that I want to be there with you, even if it's just for a couple minutes.
All right. So on that note, right? So you say something where it's like you don't necessarily, what I hear is that you're not looking for a response. This is on you.
Correct.
I think there's a responsibility on what you want out of your life. And it will go back to you, Eric, and everyone else, is that one of the big ironies that I see in life is that, someone didn't say something to me on my, someone I thought that was important. Now all of a sudden, so someone that you think is important to you didn't say congratulations, didn't come to my wedding, didn't give me a thumbs up on a post, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I invited you to something and you just didn't even respond. This is something that I feel as though there is the effort given out is sometimes reciprocated if it's on you, because it is on you. You can be that person. You're always inviting someone and all that stuff. You can always say congratulations. You're doing all that stuff. If you're doing it for the reciprocation, it's short-sighted, right? I mean, obviously, you're not going to get that from everyone. I'm talking friends. I'm talking family. I'm talking coworkers. I'm talking, you can do something nice for your significant other. You bring home flowers. If you didn't bring home flowers, they might say at some point, you never bring home flowers. If you bring home flowers, they're like, thanks. You're like,
wasn't quite the reaction.
Well, on that note,
I
don't want that reciprocation.
But this is a self-realization thing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like the whole thing is speaking up is it too often I feel as though we jobs, relationships, friendships, to yourself. There are so many avenues on this, is that if you don't collect your thoughts, if things are positive, you say, congratulations, let's get together sometime. Are you going to hold that person to it? Or do you know that you did what you thought would? I think it's more of living your life so that they realize that life gets in the way, but at least you still are important. I don't want to dive down to the point that I missed your post, Eric, or Nate, or anyone out there. I missed your post, or, you see me wish everyone else a happy birthday, and then it's like your birthday comes up and I happen to not see it or whatever. Like life is happening and I didn't wish you a happy birthday. I'm like, oh God, to me as a person, I see it. I'm like, I forgot 2 days ago, like happy belated. There are also people like you mentioned, I see you have 5 Facebook friends that are having birthdays today. I look at the list. I'm like, say happy birthday to 2 of them.
Maybe.
No, that day, it happens. 365. You have enough friends. Like every day, someone has a birthday, and everyone's a different facet of friendship. But I think there is something there that if you think about it, if you think that you should wish them a happy birthday, there's that age-old thing where you think about someone. You're like, man, I wonder what they're doing right now. We have all the avenues and technology. If you're thinking about someone, I wonder what they're doing today.
I don't wonder. I call.
But that's my point.
Are you a caller?
That's
where I want to know, actually. Are you a caller? And if so, when?
I start now with text. I start with text. I start with reaching out in a passive way. So it depends on how often I talk to them. And honestly,
it's not passive.
And how close that relationship is.
It's not passive. It's
how
polite.
active the relationship is. Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that if I call, we're in the age where now, men or women, you call someone you haven't thought about for a while, you don't see life is taking different paths. You call them, you get your voicemail. And you're like, all right. So, yeah, no, hey, just wanted to reach out and all this stuff. And I was thinking about you and all, blah, blah, blah. the text is something that was created, and I like that because like, hey, I'm thinking about you, and I just want to like, you know, you don't need to respond, but you know, I was thinking about you, and I saw that you're doing really well, and just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. That's a form of communication that it wasn't that long ago that it didn't exist.
Do you consider that to be speaking up?
It's yes, in contrast to not sending a text.
Well, it's relational, right? Is it
Well, I think a
relational
lot of
to
people
you
will-
not reaching out
I
for
think
any
a lot
other
of
reason?
people will they look at it, they think about someone, they don't even, they're like, oh man, I wonder what they're doing right now. I see they're doing well. Why don't you reach out? I mean, they're busy, I'm busy, and all of a sudden it's like the rationale. It's like, I mean, I don't know. Like,
Do you call? Nate, do you call? Are you
No.
a caller?
No. Honestly, a lot of times I kind of like what you guys alluded to. I'll sit there and analyze just how much of a relationship I have with that person. And is it worth me actually reaching out to that person?
Okay.
think about
'cause-
that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
think about that level of time and mental effort that you're doing that. It might seem like so small, but when you have that thought, and it's like, well, I mean, if I call them, they're not gonna know what to say. If I text them, like,
Okay.
and I've talked to them for a while, like, no, but what I'm saying is, like, there's a big part of that, like, you're putting all this effort into, and the end outcome might be the fact that you spent a half hour, 30, 60 minutes, a week thinking like, should I text them? Should I reach out? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying you do that.
No, okay.
People do that.
What's interesting to me is how much time I've spent with both of you in private and at the cigar shop and in other venues. And I can very comfortably say that Nate, Steve, and myself, I think that all of us are very comfortable, and I would use your phrase, speaking up when we are around the public, when we're around friends, when we're at the cigar shop. If someone brings up a subject of conversation, good or bad,
Yep.
I think that all three of us are comfortable speaking up in equal measures of comfort. Now, I think that changes when you're in the privacy of your own home, when you're on private time. I think that by profession, you must socialize in order to do your job well. You're not just a cash register. You don't just hand people products for money.
Oh, you're talking about business.
I am. So I think that speaking up is part of your profession, and it's not part of most professions. I think that it plays a part, but it is a key component to your profession.
So I think it's the way you spin it, right? I think this is something that if you identify, because a big, you know, probably the biggest part of your waking hours is the fact that you do what you do for a living, right? You know, I partially joked about it, but even inside, Eric comes into the house after several months, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't have connectivity. It's like, seriously, I'm sitting right here. Like, I know, like, if I needed to like lay down some new wires or, you know,
Wires,
cables,
Cat
5, is that where we're still at?
I don't.
Cat 18. I mean, where are we at?
Sure. Dog. Yeah.
No, I'm saying like it's the fact that it's like it's not ever a bad thing for your connections, your friends, your family, or whatever, to know what you do for a living. However, I think this is more of a responsibility on you that you don't just reach out to them. You talk about like me and you know, Nate being in the cigar industry. Nate's also in a different industry, but people out there know him from the cigar industry, right? Whiskey now. He's not selling it, but he's a whiskey guy, right? So he's a reliable source. So when he hears from people, is he hearing from them after so long that, hey, I'm at the liquor store. What do you think?
But Nate, you don't talk to the public as part of your daily job, do you? You talk to coworkers only?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the difference, though. When Nate is at work and when I'm at work, we don't talk to the public. It's once every 3 or 4 months that I might talk to a customer. Steve, you talk to him every day, but in the cigar shop, all three of us speak in equal voice and equal volume, and we are each equally heard. And I think that it's interesting that, and I think you're right. I think that speaking up is something that most are afraid of unless they feel like they're in a comfortable and accepting environment anymore.
Here's what I know about that. What you're saying there is that people know me in small circle, that I work as a manager in a cigar shop. It's cool. A lot of people are like, oh my God, like I work a 9 to 5 and, you know, I'm making $150,000, $200,000 a year. I'm like, man, that's such a cool job. I'm like, yeah, it is fun. And luckily I make a living doing this. Oh, you do a podcast? Well, yeah, we do a podcast every week. Oh, that's really cool. I listen to podcasts. Yeah, that's cool. I like bourbon. Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right.
No, hear me out.
All right.
This is not a negative thing. It's these reaches from people. And actually, Nate was wondering why I came up with this topic. This has been circling around recently with where we're at, especially in the U.S., is the fact that people are working jobs. This is nothing new, but they're working jobs that we came out of this where there are a lot of surges in your world, Eric, IT. Nate, your main bill-paying job, energy, was a big thing. It's always a big thing, but it's like now it's polarized right now. It's in a spotlight right now. We're not even getting into that, but it's the fact that it's like I work in the past. I worked in moving and storage, so that was a necessity, but we were in the high end of that. It's like when there was a time that do it yourself, renting a U-Haul was our biggest competition, right?
Yeah.
Last few years, I can only imagine that my old business that I worked for, they were just like, yeah, no, like I just have a shit ton of money to pay you to move me and pack me and all this stuff. You know what I mean? Very quickly now, it's going to transition back to the point where like, yeah, I can't afford that. You know, it's putting yourself out there. When you say when I brought up the whole speaking up thing, it's like when you're in these positions, if you feel like you're being treated unfairly, personal relationship, professionally, anything, to yourself, when you look in the mirror, life's not going the way I thought it was going to. It was going well the last couple of years, and now it's not. What are you going to do about it? You're going to say something? Sometimes you have to say it to yourself. Sometimes you have to say it to your employer, your boss. Sometimes you have to say it to the person that your significant other. But I think there's so much there. But I think, you know, Eric, to your point, yeah, people know. Let me ask you this question. Why do people know that in this small circle that we have, when they think about cigars, they might think about me. When they think about podcasts, they think about me. Why is it when they think about whiskey, they message me on a Sunday morning? Why is it that when they think about dogs, how's your dog? Why is it that they think about, oh, I see, like you said, I leave and you have a new girlfriend? Why do people have it could be passive, a vested interest in my life? And then I also have people that used to be very close to me that I literally, within the last week, I text them like, hey, I'm love you. I'm done inviting you to stuff. Because you are one of many people in my life that when I talk to them, they're like, no, I love the fact you invite me to these things. I love the fact, like when I get out there, I love it. How's everything going? I've had this conversation. This is, I think, where the speaking up part comes from me. When Nate, you asked me where it was, I'm going to frame this conversation. You guys go with it where you want, out there, here in the garage. But my biggest thing is that when I talk to someone, I had this conversation today. I'm not going to say who it was with. I think Eric, you saw this person today. how's everything going? Like, I haven't seen you in a while. The response is, I haven't seen anyone. How's everything going? Fucking Midwest, living the dream. Fuck, man. Like, all right, so things are terrible.
Well, existence.
What have
is
you done
pain.
lately? Anything fun? No. I need to. How's the job going? It's going. Making good money.
There's like no depth of conversation there whatsoever.
Like, there's no depth to the person anymore. That's my point. Like, so when is it that you speak up as an individual going through that? When is the turning point? Or as someone that I'm not a social influencer to like millions of people that don't know me. I don't have this beautiful house. I'm rolling with the openness of the fact that we have this. You can use social media for the positive. I don't use it as much as I did a year ago. I just look at this as like, speaking up is that if something is bothering you, I'm not saying just like shoot from the hip. I felt like that when I was in my 20s, the moving and storage industry. Like, I was like, I was given this position. I was taking it away. I was like, because someone else was struggling, and I roll with all that stuff. I didn't know what I wanted to do. That's the part of it. Like, speaking up is not always just be like, yeah, fuck you.
Well, fuck you.
Sometimes.
But
it's also the fact that it's like, speaking up is like, all right, it's been weeks, it's been months, I'm not happy. When do I speak up for myself? But there are other outlying factors, whether people rely on you for that income, people rely on you for that roof over their head. You rely on yourself that this is better than the contrast of not knowing.
I think that that's where we should start. I think that the conversation topic in general is a very simple equation, actually. I think it's two pieces. I think that it's comfort.
Yep.
I think it's whether or not you're comfortable is a major part. And then I think that it's, I don't want to use the word fear because fear is not the right word. It's almost control. If I knew Steve Crane for 20 years, and for all 20 years, he managed a cigar shop, and that was Steve Crane. That was my definition. That was my understanding. That was Steve Crane to me. And then I find out that you have moved to Manhattan. You've started working on Wall Street. You have become a corporate litigator.
So much cocaine.
There's so many things going on there, and nothing against the idea of you changing your career or moving or doing something else or following Matthew McConaughey in some way.
I did.
You
picked up on it.
I did. You're welcome. But more importantly, you have made a change not only to yourself, but to my understanding and my perception of reality.
That makes sense.
So it's not that it bothers me what somebody else does, because it doesn't. It's a rock to the glass house of what our perception of reality was versus what it is. And I don't think that people in general are comfortable questioning, using their words, using their communication skills. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, why are you doing that? Hey, should I be doing this? Hey, wait, am I doing the wrong thing? I think that it spirals very quickly. I think that self-doubt is the direction that I'm going adequate. Am I going to be able to pause myself from comparing myself to you or coveting your goods?
Complaining versus...
Yeah. So I don't think that my comfort should ever be determined by those around me. But I do think that my comfort should come from within while being so self-sustaining that no matter what anybody else in the world does or my life does, that it should come into question.
There is a line there you walk. I'm not going to say fine line, because there's a line that you walk where do you speak up? Is it worth it, right? This is a big part of it. Is it worth me saying anything? Is it going to change anything? Is it worth making the waters a little bit more rapid? Like, is something that, am I going to like upset?
Oh, so many people are afraid of muddying the waters or making waves.
Jonathan, I've never spoke up much in my career sense for that reason. I was taught very young a strong respect for and trust of authority that sometimes make that tough. I do. I'll respond to that briefly, and I'll put it to you guys. Eric, you are one that, from a career standpoint, that you are different, and I love having you back on here. And Nate, if you want to respond to that, or I don't want to shut you out of this conversation, but I do think that Eric is of a different breed.
Jew.
That's not what I forgot you were Jewish.
Goldhaber, really?
Oh yeah, you are Jewish.
Oh yeah, point nose and all. Yeah.
No. So Jonathan, I'm with you right there. It's like there's a bred in loyalty to authority, right? I mean, this is something that I was watching, and I want to watch the whole special, but this is going to extend this whole thing. You guys aren't going anywhere, but Bill Burr.
I did watch at Red Rocks.
You watched the whole thing?
I watched it yesterday.
So I need to, but there was the whole thing about, like, when he was like dad, you know what I mean? It was like, and I didn't have that experience. Last week we had a great conversation with Dino Tripodis about his father, and I contributed the conversation about my father. It's a fantastic part too. I really enjoyed that conversation. But watching Bill Burr was like, there was for lack of a better word, it's not fear. We called it respect for authority. And what Jonathan just said was that it was this whole thing where it's like he was taught at a very young age that a strong respect for trust of authority, so that leadership was supposed to know more and better than you because you were the young person. We have transition where it's like now the young people think that they know better. That's not a new concept, man. This has been going on for 100 years.
No, the Simpsons said it best. Am I wrong, or are the kids? No, the kids must be wrong.
It's okay. So the topic here is speaking up. Is that, do you actually speak up respectively, or do you just say you're wrong? Shoot from the hip, emotional.
Are we considering work or the rest of life as well?
Let's start with work, because there's a lot of people that early on in their careers and sometimes later in the careers, they realize that, well, I don't know what I want to do. This is a good job. When they say a good job, it is a respectable job, but the pay is there. Then they realize that I could be making more. I hear someone's making more. I'm doing a lot of work. I'm doing two people's jobs. There are so many moving parts to wherever you're working. And Eric, I love having you on this show tonight, because you have been one that you've been in the IT world since I've known you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very unique.
Well, now I'm in finance, and I gotta say, I spoke up, and you know what I did? I found out that I don't work for my employer. I work for my manager. I work for my supervisor. I work for my VP. I don't actually I work for a financial software company, and I do a very important project management job. You know what I did was I spoke up about my previous employer. I said, I don't want to work in a place where egos drive decisions instead of logic. I don't want to work for a boss or a boss's
explain that
boss.
Real quick, right? So I'm gonna pour a little bit more of this. Kind of like the rye is a little far away.
So
it goes better with cigar. Let me have the rye.
When you problem solve your way through a project or something that's broken, you want to fix the problem. You don't want to.
Some people like to fix it. Yeah.
Well, you don't want. No, if it's a business place, something's broken, something must be upgraded. You don't want to dance around it. You don't want to chew the fat until somebody pushes you into reacting. You want to solve a problem. Though. Well, in IT, there are creative ways to do things, and then at the end of the day, there are audits that require you to do this, and this, especially in the financial world. So I chose to speak up. I chose to leave an employer where management was relaxed, where management was open-minded, where management was slow to react to change. And I chose to leave a very high-paying job. I took a pay cut to work for a supervisor and a director whom I love, not only as people, but as bosses. You realize how hard it is to find a boss that you love, a boss that you want to work for.
I think a lot of people out there know that feeling.
And
I'll let me jump in here.
Please.
This is the growth of a person that I've known for a long time. And I love this, is that Eric, 5 years ago, you would have, correct me if I'm wrong.
Please.
You would have said, love my boss. Company sucks. I can make more money elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And I would have.
I'm literally moving.
Yeah. Don't care. Yeah.
And to frame it, you are a very caring person. You care about people. The dichotomy there is you would absolutely, yeah. How's your relationship? It's going well. How's the job? Job sucks. I don't respect them. What are you gonna do? So I got a new job. You're looking at a new job? No, I got a new job. What are you gonna do with your relationship? I'm going to present them with the opportunity that they can come with me to my new job. And I'm like, you really like that girl. You guys were doing well. He's like, absolutely, we're doing well. But I have a new job.
That was me. That used to be
I'm
me.
not
Absolutely.
wrong. It's not
at all.
It's not wrong. Condescending. It's
Nope.
not.
No, my career used to be number one.
You used to be number one. And the career was a byproduct of that.
And
this is fun. And Nate, please jump in. I'm not trying to talk over you. Like, we've had these part twos where I start talking to the guest, and all of a sudden, like, you know, Nate's like, I mean, you guys are rolling. And all that. Someone asked if I was still, my mic was still hot. I'm like, yeah.
What it turned into more than anything was I able to obtain happiness? And if I could, I would make moves towards that. And the other question was, could I define what I had as happiness? I don't believe that happiness is having that job or that dollar amount.
I've never heard you say pay cut.
I did. I took a pay cut because I spent that annual income on happiness. That's what I bought it with. I bought it with.
You're in a good relationship.
I'm in a great relationship.
What's her name?
Sharon. And
Sharon listening tonight?
I believe she is. I mean, I saw that she popped
Sharon,
up. She may or may not be there. She's playing video games. She might not respond.
This is like interactive video game.
But here's the thing: is I have an advanced skill set, so I get headhunted very often.
I believe that,
and I can blow every technical interview question out of the water, but I have far more insightful questions to ask them. What's your team like? What's the growth been like for your business? What are
half listening?
She's half listening. I asked them what.
Thank you, Sharon, for.
She's listening when Eric talks and ignoring.
No,
him.
she's listening to Steve. Have you heard his voice?
There was a lady came in the shop last weekend and literally told Steve that him talking was giving her chills, and that
Sharon, what's your quest that you're on right now?
Oh yeah, I told you she's
might learn something about this. I love the fact that you found someone. You've had some great relationships.
I try. You're one of them. Yeah, I'm gonna make
Different
it weird. Anyway, I have
no. In all fairness, Sharon, thanks for taking over for the rest of us.
She's a saint. No, I found that happiness should be determined within the day, not within the week or the year, not within the career, not within the relationship, within the self. And then if you can find a definition of happiness that can remain consistent with who you are as a person, you should speak up and you should act on it. Not necessarily even with your words.
It's a growth thing, right?
Well, with your decisions, with your lifestyle, with how you spend your time and your energy. When I make that phone call, when I wish that person that I haven't spoken to in months or years a happy birthday, it's my version of saying, here's my time. You matter. What's going on? How are you? Do you still give a shit about me?
So here's a concept for you guys out there, is that the little things, right? I want to say this. It is small, but super impactful. I had a recent interaction. It's more of a monologue that turned into a different interaction that I didn't expect, where I told a friend that I've known for a long time that our social circles aligned and life gets in the way. I have some very close friends that I can say Eric, you're one of them, you know, where it's like, we don't talk all the time. Now you're not close in a proximity sense. So like we can't hang out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, you want to hang out Saturday? Yeah, I'm going to drive this many hours just to hang out. I'm going to crash to your place.
Can't just show up at your house.
Some people like you just did, but you know, it's one of those things that those are the life happens things. What bothers me really like should frustrate. I know it frustrates a lot of people that listen to this, that are like friends of mine that don't listen to this. Like, oh, you do a podcast on Wednesday, you're never free. Like, yeah, but I still invite you to my house.
It's not like you don't.
When I'm having stuff, I'm doing that. Don't tell me that when we finally hang out, man, we should do this more often. We should do all this stuff. We and then
that person ghosts
6
you.
months go by. I'm like, I invited you to 3 things. You went to one of them, which was great, but the whole time you kept saying, I need to do this more often.
See, I'll never say that phrase. I'll never say that's somebody. I wish we did this more often.
I think that's why we get along to a point.
I'll make it happen.
It's not
or I won't.
You invite me down there. I don't go down there. That's a life thing, right? You know,
that's 3 hours.
You're in town. If I come in your town and it's like, oh yeah, well, you should come by. I'm like, oh well, we have a busy schedule.
Yeah,
not the same thing.
No, not at all.
If you live in the same town, you have friends. Life gets in the way. That's one thing. You have kids. You have different stages in life, and your hours are taken up. That's fantastic.
Do you think that you speak up?
I do.
You do?
Most recently, I really have. I've learned a lot about this recently, which is why, you know, Nate, you asked me why I chose this topic, and Nate's been posting some stuff this week. I'm not gonna.
That's fine.
His car.
No, it's been a rough week.
Oh, that
man.
My car got Sharpie.
He had personal stuff. He had business stuff. You know, like I'm not going to get into the details, but people that are important to me.
As soon as I posted one of those on Monday night, like immediately, even though you were here celebrating your girlfriend's birthday, I posted something and you immediately reached out to me and was asking me what was going on.
But Steve, I think it's bigger than that. I think that you speak up in more ways than you give yourself credit for.
It's not about giving credit. I truly think that it's something that like it's so. It's not funny. There's no negativity here. There are people that literally. We're a very small scale podcast. We're a very small scale cigar shop. We are a very. I talk about this on the show a lot. Today, my neighbor across the street, Matt, he's going to Put-in-Bay. Let me just walk you through this scenario. He texted me, lives across the street, Matt Lowe. Abby's expecting, fantastic. You know, I mean, Sunday was my girlfriend's birthday at High Bank. We went through this whole thing where it's like, she's like, well, if we have 10 people, it's fine. We have 11 people. We have to go through the event planning at this place, High Bank, which we've had on the podcast.
Yeah.
They're great people. They have a second location. I understand they're busy, right? I'm not going to I reached out to Adam Hines. I'm like, hey, my girl's having a birthday. Do you guys do anything special? He's like, yeah, we do a free thing of donuts. I'm like, well, she doesn't want donuts. So I'm like, all right, thanks so much. We're going to be there. But went through this. And then all of a sudden my girlfriend's like, Kristen's like, well, we're already at 10. If I have so-and-so's husband there, it's 11. If I have my friend show up, it's 12. Like, do we do it? And it was like this whole thing. It was like, if we have 11 people, it has to be on one credit card because they're trying to manage this. And I'm like, from the business side of it, I think it's garbage a little bit, but I'm like, all right, it's their policies. We'll figure it out. Matt and Abby show up. They were a maybe. We moved it to other tables. It's a great time. Love having them there. And then even today, So again, living in a cul-de-sac in suburban America, this is not a high-end suburban America, but it is what is, in my opinion, this is the U.S. right now. This is the heart of it again. They come to her birthday celebration, and it's a great time. They're going to Put in Bay to celebrate with some friends. He texts me, "Yeah, you like your steak medium or medium rare?" I'm like, "Medium rare." Why? What are you doing? He's like, "I got a 4-pack. I'm smoking them up. I'm gonna grill them tonight. We're leaving for the weekend. I'll just bring them over." What? He comes in the shop today to buy like 3 cigars. I gave him a 4th,
sure,
as a gift, and even Brian, the owner of the shop, he's like, "I was gonna help him, but then I realized that that is your neighbor." That impactful side of it is that, like, no one realizes that when you open yourself up to that, you speak up, you talk, you literally just say something. Someone's mowing their lawn. And like, yeah, I need to mow mine too. Like, I've been busy. It's just opening the lines of communication with your significant other, your neighbors, your job. It's not just closing off, which is what I think most people do.
It's comfort zone. That's what it's fear and it's comfort zone.
It's so uncomfortable, though.
It is. Well,
it is.
It's uncomfortable for us who care.
It is burying.
But
it is a stig. It is a. It pushes anxiety. It pushes. That mirror gets heavier. I should have said something. You take all of your direction that you would have not easily, you could have easily just said something, but all the fear of confrontation, all of the fear of uncomfortable situations backfire. I think that is where a lot of people are at.
Well, you brought up Bill Burr, and he's talked about in multiple stand-up specials and even on his own podcast. And I think this is something that a lot of men do in particular, is like, we literally just eat and bury that shit. Like, whatever emotions that we have about something, we just bury it instead of speaking
100%.
up. I know personally for me, like when it comes to work, like, one of the reasons I don't speak up as much to the people that I need to speak up to is a fear of retaliation, because that's happened to me before. What's
the fear? What if someone retaliates?
Then my day-to-day job's going to get a lot worse.
Or gone.
Respond.
Or gone, absolutely.
Gone,
or I'm going to
absolutely.
lose my job and my paycheck and not be able to support my family.
Well, but
that's
okay. Let's say
that's
that's
the
gone.
big
Let's say that's not gone. Let's say that let's pretend for a second. Let's live in fairy tale land where your job is 100% guaranteed. I think that the fear is still there.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think that what we do is we hold sacred this equilibrium that we've maybe accepted too little of normalcy. I think that we allow for that relationship that you have with a coworker, that normal working communication of, maybe you have small talk, maybe you talk about your personal life, maybe you avoid it like the plague. But I think that I am too. I'm the exact same way. Not you. Sorry. I think that we're afraid of losing bits of our soul to no longer having comfort, no longer having peace, no longer having happiness, if you can even call it that, at work, because you had an agreement, an unspoken agreement for how you two are going to get through the day together. And even if your job's never once at risk, I think that you still hold off on speaking up and saying the thing that you really want to say, like, "Hey, asshole, you're forgetting to blah, 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 blah,"
Right.
or whatever. I think you hold off on that because you know that you could be in this job for 2 more weeks. You could be in this job for 2 more decades. And it's just not worth making it that much worse in the future. So I share the same fear. I have many colleagues with shortcomings who have found their way to do their jobs not only well, but exceptionally. And we all hold our tongues when any of their imperfections rear their heads, because we know that if we say something, that we're going to get the ball rolling on what we call corrective action. And that can go very well or it can go very poorly. And that very poorly, it doesn't just take the future of your working relationship and throw it into jeopardy. It throws your ability to go into your job, do your job, and come out afterwards without feeling drained. I think that having to hold somebody's hand more than you should, who's a peer, who does what you do or manages you, having to hold their hand through something that they're not grasping entirely, that drain just takes away from your ability. So it's a fear that I share as well.
We all do. Let me frame this. When you have no personal, professional responsibility to a conversation, and someone says something, Eric, you said something earlier that, when we first started part 2, it was about like the political, like all that stuff. When you have no personal weight on the conversation,
no dog in the fight,
you have a choice to get in there if you have the time, or you're like, yeah, I gotta go pick up some food. I gotta go home. The dog, cat, whatever. Like I'm not gonna do it. When you have some personal dog in the fight, it's your significant other. It's your family.
Skin in the game, Ray says.
Yeah, skin in the game. Your livelihood.
You volunteer that energy right away.
It's unfortunate. We talk about it from the outside, a lot of times when you look at other people's lives and what they're doing with their career, and they're killing it, and all of a sudden it's like it's the same. It doesn't matter if you're making 6 figures, 7 figures, 50 grand a year. It doesn't matter. You're always worried about the bills. However, what I've learned is that there are times where you might have to step back before you shoot from the hip and just say something, speak up. Right? So there is something there. If you don't speak up, and you've already calculated the risk and the reward, the SWOT side of it.
SWOT, like the acronym?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, man. God, you are white collar.
So
very white.
Yeah.
So, but I'm saying is that before Nate, to you next, but I'm just saying it's like there are enough points where you get burned by not saying something that you've succeeded. This is very unique, yet very common. Your career path has said, your relationship path has shown. I don't say something, I just try to work through it. What happens long term?
Well, you lose your happiness.
And you leave.
Or even worse, you don't leave and you remain unhappy.
But when you leave or someone leaves you, what is the common theme? Career, relationship, personal growth. You didn't speak up. You didn't stand up for yourself. You didn't communicate.
You may leave that situation that other party had no idea.
You don't say what's on your mind. I'm not saying you're right. I'm saying the fact that you didn't give your opinion. You didn't start a dialogue because you're so afraid of it. I'll say this is very minor to anyone listening out there, is that Nate and I, Eric and I, we've had some great agreements. We've had some great conversations that really grew both of us. We are still friends after confronting each other about how we feel differently about something. And I don't know if you guys agree, but I think you do. We butted heads with mutual respect because we both went into that situation, whether we knew it was coming or we just were honest. I don't treat you the way I should treat you, and you don't treat me the way I should be treated. That's friendships. That is significant others. That is career. If you know someone is being treated better in your job because of whatever reason it is, if you see someone that is friends with you and also mutual friends, and they're like, that person isn't giving anything and I'm giving everything, it's having the conversation. It's speaking up. You have to speak up just to get it out there. The biggest question mark, or the biggest gamble, is that they respond the way you don't want them to respond.
But that's a good thing, because if they respond the way that you don't want them to respond, you know what that did? That answered all the questions you needed to know about who they are to you. Because you know what? You can come at me the most disrespectful way. You can be as crass and as hurtful as you want. At the end of the day, because of our relationship, I know that it comes from a place of love and caring. You could be right and I never saw it and I could grow, or you could be deadly wrong and it could have been the worst opinion ever. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to real friends, because they know that whatever you're about to say, it comes from a place of caring. And
because I said something.
Anything.
I said how I felt. Now you have the time to reflect on that. Immediately you might be like, what the fuck? Are you serious?
This asshole.
Well, and I think to that, sometimes, especially in a relationship, it's beneficial to speak up when that issue comes up.
Sooner the better.
Yeah, because
you have to calculate. You have to reflect.
I say that because there have been times in my relationship with my wife where I may have said something that
she's still tuning in.
She may be one of the YouTube listeners right now.
Yes.
But no, and she knows that she has this issue, so it's not like I'm saying anything new. But there have been times where I have said something that she was unhappy with, like it struck her the wrong way. And instead of her bringing it up then or soon, it was like a month later. So like I'm already gone. I'm already past it, but yet she's allowed this to build up for 3-4 weeks. And then all of a sudden she wants to bring it up. And I'm like, no, I don't remember. What, you can't get the cork out?
Hey, you fucked up with the cork.
I didn't fuck it up. They didn't use enough glue.
Shipped from us.
But no, like she brought up something I said, and I'm like, I don't remember saying that. It sounds like something I probably would have said. But it's like we've already moved past this, I thought. And, now you're bringing this up now. She already has more skin in the game, more emotion built onto that subject than I do. And so if we're having a discussion, as soon as that discussion starts, like I'm down here and she's already up here. Like, and if I immediately bridge that gap and get on the same emotional level as her on that subject, well, then we're just fighting. And that's not doing either of us any good.
You would never fight with her, though, right?
Physically, no. She'd whoop my ass.
Second that.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm in that boat, too.
Yeah, I haven't met her. I've seen pictures.
Oh, she's small, but she'll whoop my ass.
Yeah. So I look at all this stuff, like, speak up. It's... We all go through the ups and downs about a lot of this stuff, whether it be, job wise or personal. We all have different stories, friendships.
Oh, I
is
just
big
got a
one.
text.
Uh-oh.
Just have Jess text me. It's fine. I got my phone over here. But I do look at this as it's fun to see people grow that you've known for a long time. If they, and this is negative, if they don't change in a misguided sense for themselves. And that's absolutely judgmental, but it's fun having this topic that, I know Eric was going to be a part of, and this is a different conversation that Eric and I have never had. And Nate being a part of this is same thing. You guys have seen me go through a lot of different things in the last 20 years. You didn't know me as a kid, high school person, college person, even you didn't know my ex-wife. You knew me afterwards. The one thing that I'm proud of is that I did slip a lot of times, but I pride myself in the continued relationships with people that were important to me. And life gets in the way that we don't always hang out. We don't hang out in each other's garages. There will be a time that Nate doesn't come over every Wednesday night. Or there might be a point where 20 years from now, we're still having this podcast.
Oh, God.
Point being is that you don't know. It's about what you want out of the friendship, the relationship. Is that, like, Eric, you coming up? We're close, but we're not everyday close. There's a respect. And I think that's the biggest part of this, is that you speak up because you respect the other person, the other party, and you respect yourself. That you want to absolutely, if you're not happy, if you are happy, if you think they're happy, it's you vocalize that. You literally reach out. When your Facebook memories say that you have 5 people that are celebrating birthdays today, do you want to say happy birthday to all 5 of them?
I've actually made a single post where it's been like, hey, to every one of my friends having a birthday today, instead of sending out a bunch of
that's
individuals.
Like, you don't care about this. Like you care about those people, but you're not. But my point is, my remarks are, I text some of those people. I don't call them. I don't put them on Facebook. It's how you feel about it.
I go the other way sometimes. Sometimes those Facebook birthday notifications, they'll remind me that
I haven't fucking talked to that person forever.
No, I'll say, oh, I forgot that person existed, and I'll unfriend them on their birthday.
Oh,
because
shit.
I realized that they were in my life accidentally still, and I actually didn't care about them. I won't let that passive coasting persist in my life. If you don't matter to me, and I forgot that you existed, it's time. Rip the Band-Aid off.
I'm fortunate that I don't. I get what you're saying. I have not had that experience. I will say that I don't wish everyone a happy birthday.
Mm-hmm. Well, neither do I. But and it's not a lot. But if it's somebody where I have to wonder, wait, who is that? Nah, I don't. You don't need to have access to my life. You don't need to see my feed. You don't need to see the things I'm doing.
What I'll say to that, and I'll put you guys to closing remarks here, is that so the beauty. You're an Android guy, I'm an iPhone guy. We've had this. I was at a point in my life where I added everyone to my, Facebook was adding everyone to my my calendar. and people I didn't know, but I knew their birthday. I'd add them to my calendar with their birth date, so I knew how old they were. Happy 32nd, happy 64th, whatever it is. That's really something that speak up is the topic. So for me, it's like at some point you get worn out. You don't add new people to your calendar. You did it. You extended your thoughts. You extended your comments, and then they didn't reciprocate. You're the same person in your 40s, 50s, whatever, however old you are, that you were in your 20s. That it's all about, I'm doing this, they should do this. I think there is a maturity level that at some point you wish good wishes on people or good thoughts on people that you care about, that you may or may not have thought about for weeks or months, but when they come up on your phone, they come up on your thoughts that you actually reach out to. To Eric, your point, and some people it's
time.
You don't vocalize it. You don't like, yeah, fuck you, I'm deleting you. You're just like that. I'm in the middle. It's like there are some people that are important to me that have gone down that road. And I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, no response necessary. I'm done inviting you. You've come to some things and your life is going well. There's no disrespect, but when I don't invite you, next thing you see that on social media.
Don't take it personally, but gotta move on.
I want you there. You don't want to be there. And you haven't invited me to anything. Same thing career-wise. I've put myself out there. You haven't treated me the same.
5, 6, 8 years at the same employer, not be recognized. All right, time to move on.
But if you speak up, there might be a change. If you don't speak up, you leave and you're mad. Nate, closing remarks.
I think sometimes speaking up can just be venting to other people. Like I said, in my career right now, like if I were to speak up to the person that I have the biggest issue with, there's definitely a fear of retaliation just because of the position that person is in.
Yeah.
Because there have been times in the past where I have spoken up and either they've retaliated against me, their manager has retaliated against me, and then that person even above them has retaliated against me. And so like when I go through that, where I have that many levels of people who don't care or retaliate against me, it doesn't make me want to speak up again.
It trains you not to.
It does. But if I'm having an issue, there are people at my job that I am close enough with that at the very least I can vent to them about what's going on. And I can have a conversation with them about what's bugging me or, what doesn't seem right. And sometimes, even though that person I may be venting to isn't part of the problem or part of the solution, like it's at least a way for me to get it off my chest.
Yeah.
And speaking up doesn't have to be against the person that you're pissed about. Speaking up just means you've done a thing.
You vented.
Yeah.
And you dealt with it, at least in a way, in some way.
And maybe, there is one person specifically on my team that, like, if I do vent to them, they do have an influence on things going forward, definitely more than I do. But it starts with actually talking about it, even if it's not talking in a business sense, even if it's not talking to the person responsible, it's at least talking about it to let it be known. If now on the flip side, if I had personal relationship issues, that is not something that I would be venting to other people about
or fearful of speaking,
because at that point but at that point, I feel like it would be gossiping. Like if I have an issue with my wife and I talk to coworkers about it, that's
counterproductive.
We're going nowhere with that.
No,
like, because then as soon as I log off the computer for the day, the problem's still there. Like, there is absolutely no solution to that whatsoever. There's no benefit to that.
Introduced a negative aspect to your employer or coworkers.
Yeah,
you're not actually speaking up.
Yeah.
No, yeah, you're speaking, but you're not speaking up.
You're speaking out.
Yeah, you're speaking. That's a good way to say speaking out versus speaking up. That's well said, Steve.
Every once in a while. Oh, thanks, everyone.
Stuck in your thumb, pull out a plum.
What the?
Every week.
Every week.
And sometimes in between.
But like the social media aspect, there are people that like I'll see them, they have a birthday, and if there's someone that I actually consider myself to be friends with them, but there's someone that I may run into, like I'll wait till I actually see that person to wish them a happy birthday, because
I saw you had a birthday.
Because I think it means more when you actually say it to that person in person,
and you remembered,
but like I think wishing happy birthday to someone on social media is kind of a cop out, right? Like that's the easy, like that is the bare minimum. Like you saw 6 other people wish them a happy birthday.
No. Facebook tells you.
Like I'll wait till that person. That's the thing. Sometimes
you don't see that person.
Well, sometimes I don't even see that it was their birthday until like the day after. And I'm like, oh shit, it was that person's birthday.
You text them, you buy them a cigar.
I think he's just okay with not wishing everyone personally a happy birthday.
Yes, I am, Eric.
Attaboy. Not everyone's important. I think that's an important realization that we should all come to.
Fair. Eric, how about your closing remarks? Say something.
Speak
up.
I will speak up instead of out. And I want to say a couple things, actually.
This lined up really well having you on.
Thank you.
You know that, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I hear you. I feel like there's a lot of coasting. In everyone's coasting. I think that a lot of people...
Say that louder for those in the back.
I feel like there's a lot of people who find comfort in normalcy and just let it ride. I don't think that they just let it happen to them. I think they let life happen to them.
Coasting.
Yeah, coasting. Because when you go in your car and you set a speed, you click a button and you sit there. And you put the most minimal effort possible into wiggling the wheel and keeping it in between the lines. I think that's the perfect metaphor for life.
I was going to pour that into the infinity bottle.
I'm trying to get your cork out of here.
I think that what I'd really want to close with more than anything, Steve, is that
got a wine opener.
Yeah.
Keep talking, Eric.
I'm amazed that it took 2 of you to get one bottle of whiskey open.
I opened the one.
You're right. It's not open yet. I apologize.
So there's a Houdini in there that apparently does that. There's a old school way. There's another old school way.
The shoe way.
We'll get it open.
Some bourbon and BS. When you can get to it.
That's all the BS. I feel like Nate.
All I did was pull up on that thing and the lid just popped right off.
Not all of us can work out as much as you, Nate. We know you're strong.
The rough week.
Just hulked the whole thing right off of it.
No, hulking it would have been shucking it across the fucking garage.
Hey, the night's young.
Oh, why would you do that?
Exactly. I wouldn't. Like, defeats the purpose.
Manhandle that cork.
No,
We'll get it out. Don't worry.
That's what she said.
We'll get.
Why?
Eric, go ahead. Let's round it out.
Let's round it out. All right.
I'll give a couple thoughts. I'll be brief.
I think that everyone should seek something close to what I sought out, which is find an employer, find a manager, find a partner, find a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife that is willing to not only accept what you have to speak about, but that celebrates that you chose to expend the energy on having spoken about anything.
It's on you, though.
My job has shifted from being an engineer who does things and builds things and fixes things, and it has shifted entirely. My new job at my current employer is the normal for me is I'm expected to identify patterns of potential negative outcome and create from nothing ways to introduce policy, procedure, vetting. And my boss shipped me out of his own wallet a book written by some engineers at Google that wrote a book on how to make sure that a whole bunch of things in a bunch of different places worked together and kept everything up and running. And it wasn't because he wanted us to take any of their policies. It was because he wanted to encourage discussion around doubting that what we had was acceptable.
You would do the same thing for reports that were directly.
Absolutely, I would.
That's why you respect that person.
I want to hear good ideas, bad ideas. I want to hear ideas. I want to hear from people. And because the wrong idea in the right subject to the right person doesn't have to be the right idea. All it has to do is provoke the right discussion. That right discussion, the fact that discussion's even happening is how growth is achieved. And I'm lucky that my boss does it, but I wish more people did it and applied the concept to life.
So you introduced something I did not. Did through friendship, the audience.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big part of it. So speaking of, when I came up with the topic that Nate didn't know why I did that, Nate was a factor.
Yeah, I picked up on that, I thought.
Eric wanted to be a part of this.
So
was a factor. So what's up?
What's up?
Stop. Eric was a factor. My life was a factor. It's very important to everyone out there that you have this reassessment of your life, that you don't just complain. You look at the big picture, where you're at, where do you want to be. Things will change. You thought you're on a certain path, and it'll change. It always, this show, for those that listen to the end, I don't think there's a whole lot of people listening to the end. It's fun for the people that listen to the end, for the simple reason that when I say the fact that it's not about who you're with, who you work for, your coworkers, or what you do on your personal life. There is a very resounding effort. You say you take care of yourself and you literally put your nose down. And when things aren't going the way you want them to go, if you put yourself 100% out there, family will pick you up. Friends will pick you up. Everything out there will pick you up. Other jobs will pick you up. You will do better if you're honest with yourself. We all go through tough times. But life will, it's not one hurdle. What I love about the topic of saying something or speaking up is calculate why you want to say something and speak up for yourself. You have one life. I think in this table right here, we've had our ups and downs. We're still friends through it. We don't see each other every day. Everyone out there, I hope you take one kernel of positivity. You stand up for yourself. I truly believe that we all believe in that, but Eric and Nate, not right now, but there was a point you didn't do that. Because people around you are more important than you.
Well said.
Cheers, guys. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. That's what we do.